A single mother brought her 6-year-old daughter to work at a Fortune 500 company, and when the millionaire CEO saw the pendant around the little girl's neck, his entire world came crashing down. Before we start the story, tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 and subscribe to our channel. Enjoy the story. He stood frozen in the gleaming corridor of his own empire, staring at a child he'd never met. But it wasn't her face that stopped his heart. It was the silver pendant hanging around her neck, catching the light like a ghost from his past. The same pendant he'd placed in a woman's hands 7 years ago, the night before she vanished without a trace. And as the little girl looked up at him with eyes that mirrored his own, he realized the truth she'd been hiding could destroy everything he'd built or finally give him the one thing money could never buy. But to understand how a single piece of jewelry could shatter a man who controlled billions, we have to go back to a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Back to before he knew. Back to when Marcus Chen still believed he had everything figured out. Marcus Chen didn't believe in fate. He believed in quarterly earnings, strategic acquisitions, and the kind of ruthless efficiency that had built Chen Industries from a failing tech startup into a multinational conglomerate worth $23 billion. At 42, he'd achieved everything the business magazine said a man should want. The penthouse overlooking Seattle's Elliott Bay. The Aston Martin in the private garage. The respect, or was it fear, that rippled through a boardroom when he walked in. But here's the thing about building an empire. You can construct it so high, so perfect, that you forget to look at the foundation. And sometimes, the cracks don't show until the whole thing's about to come down. It was a Tuesday in late September when everything changed. The morning started the way it always did. Marcus was awake at 5:30. Exactly as he'd been for the past 15 years. No alarm needed. His body had been programmed like one of his company's algorithms. Coffee first, black, no sugar, poured from the machine that cost more than most people's cars. Then the treadmill, where he'd run exactly 6 miles while scanning the overnight market reports on the screens mounted to the wall. By 7, he was showered, suited, and out the door. The drive to Chen Industries headquarters took 18 minutes, and Marcus used every second of it to prepare for the day ahead. Today was the quarterly board meeting, and he had a presentation that would either secure the merger with Apex Technologies or send 6 months of negotiation down the drain. The lobby of Chen Industries was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. Marcus's shoes clicked against the polished marble as he strode through, acknowledging the security guard's greeting with a slight nod. He didn't smile. Smiling implied friendliness, and friendliness implied weakness. In his world, you couldn't afford either, Mr. Chen. His executive assistant, Robert, fell into step beside him as he reached the private elevator. Robert was efficient, invisible when needed, and had been with Marcus for 8 years. Your 9 o'clock with the design team has been pushed to 10. Sandra Morrison requested an urgent meeting. Marcus frowned. Sandra Morrison ran the entire HR department, and she didn't request urgent meetings unless there was a problem. What's it about? She didn't say, sir. Just that it's sensitive. The elevator doors whispered open on the 42nd floor. The executive level, where the air somehow felt thinner and the silence more expensive. Marcus's office occupied the corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view most people only saw in dreams. But he barely noticed it anymore. The view had stopped mattering somewhere around year 3. He'd just settled behind his desk, the sleek surface empty, except for a single laptop and a fountain pen that had belonged to his father. When Sandra knocked, "Come in." Sandra Morrison was in her mid-50s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made her perfect for HR. She'd been with the company for 12 years and had seen Marcus through 3 major scandals, 2 hostile takeover attempts, and 1 particularly nasty divorce. If she looked worried, it was worth paying attention to. Marcus. She sat down without being invited, which told him everything he needed to know about how serious this was. We have a situation. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I'm listening. It's about the new employee wellness policy, the one requiring all staff to have emergency childcare protocols in place. Marcus nodded. It had been Sandra's initiative, actually. Something about employee retention and work-life balance. He'd approved it because the data showed it reduced turnover, which reduced costs. Simple economics. One of our employees in the finance department, Elena Rodriguez, her regular childcare fell through this morning. Her daughter's school has a teacher development day, and her usual sitter is ill. And Marcus's patience was already wearing thin. This is what the emergency protocols are for. Send her home, dock her PTO if necessary, and she can't afford to lose the day, Sandra interrupted. She's already used all her PTO this quarter for her daughter's medical appointments, and she's working on the Apex merger documentation. If she's not here today, the board presentation doesn't happen. Marcus felt a flicker of annoyance. This was exactly why emotional attachments were liabilities. Children, relationships, all of it. Just complications that got in the way of what actually mattered. Then what are you suggesting? Sandra met his gaze steadily. She asked if she could bring her daughter in for the day. Keep her in her office. Keep her quiet. The child is 6, apparently very well behaved. Absolutely not. The words came out harder than he'd intended. This is a corporate office, not a daycare center. It sets a terrible precedent. I know. Sandra's expression didn't change. But here's the thing, Marcus. Elena Rodriguez is one of the best financial analysts we have. She's been working 70-hour weeks on this merger. Her work is flawless. And she's a single mother who's holding her life together with duct tape and determination. She paused. Also, she's exactly the kind of employee your PR team has been trying to highlight in those Chen Industries Cares campaigns. Young woman of color, working her way up, overcoming obstacles. If we fire her over this, or even reprimand her publicly, it's going to look bad. There it was. The real reason Sandra was in his office? Not compassion, though Marcus suspected Sandra had more of that than she let on, but optics. Everything always came down to optics. He drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. The Apex merger was worth $2 billion. Elena's work on the documentation had been impeccable, and with the media already circling, looking for any hint of the corporate heartlessness they loved to crucify CEOs for. One day, he said finally, she keeps the child in her office. I don't see her. I don't hear her. If this becomes a distraction, they both leave. Clear? Sandra nodded, standing. Clear. Thank you, Marcus. After she left, Marcus turned to face the window, watching the city spread out below him like a kingdom he'd conquered. He didn't feel magnanimous. He felt manipulated, which was worse. But sometimes you had to make concessions. That's what his father had never understood. That flexibility, in small doses, was just another form of strategy. He pushed the thought away and pulled up the Apex presentation on his laptop. There was work to do. The morning passed in its usual blur of meetings and phone calls. Marcus barely thought about the situation again until around 11:30, when he needed to head down to the finance department to review some last-minute numbers with Elena's team before the board presentation. The finance department was on the 38th floor, a maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices where the real magic of Chen Industries happened. Numbers didn't lie, didn't have feelings, didn't need childcare. Numbers just were. It was one of the reasons Marcus had always felt more comfortable with spreadsheets than people. He was halfway to Elena's office, his mind already calculating the revenue projections, when he saw them. A woman stood in the corridor, bent down slightly, talking to a small child. The woman, Elena, he assumed, was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, and an expression of patient exhaustion that seemed to be a permanent fixture. She wore a simple gray dress that was nice enough for the office but had probably come from a department store sale rack. There was a coffee stain on the hem she'd tried to hide by tugging the fabric just so, but it was the child who caught his attention. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She had her mother's dark hair, falling in loose waves past her shoulders, but there was something about her face. The shape of her cheekbones, the set of her jaw, that seemed almost familiar in a way Marcus couldn't quite place. She wore a pink dress with white flowers, the kind you'd see in the children's section at Target, and she clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit against her chest. Elena was speaking softly. "Remember, Mija, you have to stay quiet in Mommy's office, okay? You can color, you can read your book, but you have to be very, very quiet. Can you do that for me?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mommy. That's my good girl. And if you need anything?" That's when the girl turned slightly, and Marcus saw it. The pendant. It hung from a simple silver chain around the child's neck, resting just above the collar of her dress. At first glance, it looked like 1,000 other pieces of children's jewelry. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. But Marcus knew better, because he recognized it. Every curve, every detail, every impossible inch of it. It was a small silver compass, no bigger than a quarter, intricately engraved with a pattern of stars and constellation lines. The glass covering the face had a tiny crack in the upper right corner, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. And on the back, though he couldn't see it from where he stood, would be an inscription in letters so small you needed a magnifying glass to read them. "Follow your heart. Always." Now Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, just a moment, he forgot how to move, because he'd only ever given that pendant to one person, 7 years ago. The night before, she disappeared from his life without a word, without an explanation, without even a goddamn goodbye. The night before, Sophia left him, and this child, this little girl with the familiar cheekbones and his grandmother's compass hanging around her neck, was standing right in front of him. Elena must have sensed his presence because she looked up, her eyes widening slightly when she saw him. "Mr. Chen." She straightened quickly, one hand instinctively moving to rest on her daughter's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. We were just—" But Marcus couldn't hear her, couldn't process the words she was saying. All he could see was that pendant, catching the fluorescent lights of the corridor, glinting like a secret that had been buried for 7 years and was now clawing its way to the surface. His eyes moved from the pendant to the child's face, really seeing her for the first time. And that's when he noticed the eyes, dark brown, almost black, with flecks of amber near the center. The exact same unusual pattern that Marcus saw every time he looked in the mirror. The same eyes his father had, and his grandmother before him. The hallway suddenly felt like it was closing in. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Every question, every demand, every shocked exclamation died in his throat because he couldn't string together a coherent thought. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, a drum beating out a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like no, 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 no. "Mr. Chen?" Elena's voice sounded distant, concerned. "Are you all right?" The little girl was staring up at him now, curious and completely unaware of the atomic bomb she'd just detonated in his chest. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with those impossible eyes. "You're very tall," she said softly. And that's when Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. If that pendant was here, if this child was wearing the compass he'd given to Sophia, the woman who'd vanished 7 years ago, then that meant he did the math in his head. Quick, brutal, undeniable. This child was 6 years old, maybe 7, which meant she would have been born around 9 months after Sophia disappeared. The world snapped back into focus with cruel clarity. Marcus's gaze locked onto Elena Rodriguez, and he saw her expression change, saw the moment she realized that he wasn't just looking at her daughter. He was recognizing her daughter, or at least recognizing something about her. "We need to talk," Marcus said, and his voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "My office, now!" Elena's face went pale. "Mr. Chen, I can explain about bringing Lily in. I know it's not about that." He cut her off, his eyes flicking back to the child. Lily. Her name was Lily. And then back to Elena. "It's about where she got that pendant." The color drained from Elena's face completely. Her hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder, and Marcus saw something flash through her eyes. Fear, yes, but also guilt. And in that moment, standing in the sterile corridor of his own company, with the sound of keyboards clicking and phones ringing all around him, Marcus Chen realized that the empire he'd built so carefully was about to come crashing down, because that little girl with his eyes and his grandmother. His compass wasn't just some random child, she was a question he'd never thought to ask. And Elena Rodriguez was hiding the answer. Elena Rodriguez had survived a lot in her 32 years. A childhood bouncing between foster homes, working 2 jobs while getting her finance degree, raising a daughter alone in a city where a 1-bedroom apartment cost more than most people made in a month. She'd learned to keep her head down, do her work, and never draw attention to herself. But standing in Marcus Chen's office, with Lily sitting on the leather sofa in the corner clutching her stuffed rabbit, Elena felt the careful walls she'd built around her life beginning to crumble. Marcus stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid. He hadn't said a word since they'd entered the office 3 minutes ago. He'd simply gestured for her to sit, positioned Lily on the sofa with a tablet playing cartoons with the sound on low, and then walked to that window, like he needed the entire city as a witness to whatever was about to happen. Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, pressing hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Mr. Chen," she started. "Where did you get it?" His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the tremor underneath, like he was holding back an earthquake. "The pendant. Where did your daughter get that pendant?" Elena's throat went dry. She'd known this moment might come someday. In her worst nightmares, she'd imagined it 1,000 different ways. But she'd always told herself it wouldn't happen. That, in a company with over 2,000 employees, in a city of millions, the odds of this specific collision were too astronomical to worry about. She'd been wrong. "It was a gift," she said quietly. "From her. From someone important." Marcus turned then, and the look on his face made Elena's breath catch. She'd seen him around the office before, of course. Everyone had. Marcus Chen was a legend. The genius CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. The man who could silence a room with a single glance. But she'd never been this close to him before. Never seen the way his jaw tightened when he was fighting for control. Never noticed the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, or the way his eyes weren't just brown, but had these flecks of amber that caught the light. The same flecks that Lily had. "Don't!" His voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. "Don't do that. Don't give me vague answers and half-truths. That pendant belonged to my grandmother. It's been in my family for 3 generations. The only time it left my possession was 7 years ago when I gave it to someone He stopped, his jaw working. "Someone I cared about very much." Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She couldn't afford to cry. "Not here. Not now. I know," she whispered. Marcus went very still. "You know?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a demand, and a plea all wrapped into 2 words. Elena glanced at Lily, who was absorbed in her cartoon, oblivious to the tension crackling through the air. Then she looked back at Marcus, and she made a decision. The same decision she'd been putting off for 6.5 years. Her name was Sophia Martinez, Elena said, and watched Marcus's face go pale. She was my sister. The silence that followed was so complete, Elena could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 42 floors below. Marcus stood frozen, and for a moment she thought he might not have heard her. But then his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and she knew he'd heard every word. Was, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. You said was, and there it was. The moment Elena had been dreading for nearly 7 years. The moment when she'd have to say the words out loud, to him, the man Sophia had loved with a ferociousness that had burned through her like wildfire. Sophia died, Elena said, and the words felt like broken glass in her mouth. 6.5 years ago, complications from childbirth. She watched the life drain out of Marcus's face. He stumbled backward, his hand reaching out to grip the edge of his desk, and for a second, Elena thought he might actually fall. This man who commanded boardrooms and controlled billions looked like he'd been shot. No. The word came out strangled. No, that's not. She can't be. I'm sorry. And Elena meant it. God, she meant it with every broken piece of her heart. I'm so sorry. Marcus shook his head, like he could physically deny the reality she was giving him. She left. She just vanished. No note, no explanation, nothing. I looked for her. For months I looked. I hired investigators. His voice cracked. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because she didn't want you to know. The words came out harsher than Elena intended, but there was no gentle way to say it. She'd spent years resenting Sophia for that decision, even as she'd honored it, even as she'd raised Sophia's daughter as her own and kept the secret locked up so tight it had nearly suffocated her. Marcus's eyes snapped to hers, and the pain in them was so raw it hurt to look at. Explain that. Right now. Explain how the woman I was going to marry, the woman who told me she loved me, could just disappear and then... He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say die out loud. Elena took a shaky breath. This was it. The story she'd held inside for so long, it had become part of her bones. Sophia was pregnant when she left you, Elena said softly. She found out 2 days before she disappeared. And she panicked. Panicked? Marcus's voice rose slightly, and Elena saw Lily glance over, curious. He noticed too and forced himself to lower his voice, but the intensity didn't diminish. What the hell does that mean? We were together for 2 years. We were planning a future. Why would she panic? Because you were Marcus Chen. Elena spread her hands helplessly. The millionaire CEO with the perfect life and the family expectations and the empire to run. And she was nobody. A girl from the wrong side of town who'd clawed her way into an executive assistant position and still felt like an imposter every single day. That's not, Marcus started. But Elena cut him off. Yes, it is. She talked about it constantly. About how your mother looked at her like she was dirt. About how your business partners made jokes. About her being your flavor of the month. About how she'd overheard your father telling you that marrying beneath your station would damage the company's reputation. Elena's voice hardened. She loved you, Marcus. God, she loved you so much it scared her. But she didn't think she was good enough for your world. And when she found out she was pregnant, she convinced herself that you'd resent her, that she'd trap you in a life you didn't really want. Marcus was shaking his head. She was wrong. I would have... Would you? Elena challenged. Really? Because Sophia told me about the conversation you had about children, about how you said you weren't ready, that you wanted to wait until the company was more stable, until you'd secured the Hartman merger. She said you'd tabled the discussion for at least 5 years. She watched that land, watched the memory surface in Marcus's eyes, and she saw the moment he realized that Sophia had heard something different in those words than he'd intended. that his practical, strategic approach to life planning had sounded like rejection to a woman already convinced she didn't belong. "So she ran," Marcus said flatly. "She ran, and she died, and she never gave me a chance to—" His voice broke again. "I could have helped her. I would have taken care of her. I would have—" "I know." Elena's voice softened. "I know you would have. But she didn't believe that. And by the time I'd convinced her to at least tell you, to give you a chance to be a father to your child, it was too late." Marcus's gaze drifted to Lily, who was still watching her cartoon, completely unaware that her entire existence was being discussed like a court case. "That little girl," he said hoarsely. "She's mine." It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway. "Her name is Lily Sofia Rodriguez. She'll be 7 in 3 months. And yes, she's yours." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Marcus stared at his daughter. Because that's what she was. Elena could see him accepting it in real time, and his expression went through about a dozen emotions so quickly Elena couldn't track them all. Shock, grief, anger, wonder, loss, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "You've been raising her," Marcus said slowly. "Alone, while working here, while I've been—" He gestured vaguely around the office, at the empire he'd built while his daughter grew up without him. "Sophia made me promise," Elena said. "Before she died, she made me promise to take care of Lily, to love her, to give her the stability she never had. And she made me promise not to tell you. She said you'd already built your life, and she didn't want to ruin it." "Ruin it?" Marcus's laugh was bitter, broken. "She thought telling me I had a daughter would ruin my life? She thought telling you would trap you in an obligation you didn't want. She thought you'd resent Lily for existing. And she thought—" Elena hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "She thought your family would try to take Lily away from her, that they'd use their money and power to claim she was an unfit mother, and she'd lose the baby before she even got to hold her." Marcus flinched like she'd slapped him. "My family isn't—" "Your mother once told Sophia she wasn't suitable breeding stock." Elena's voice was ice. "Sophia told me that. She cried for 3 days after that dinner party. So yes, Marcus, your family is exactly that cruel." And Sophia was terrified of them. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus turned back to the window, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the entire building. Elena could see his reflection in the glass, could see the way his hand came up to cover his face. "I didn't know," he said finally, and his voice was raw. "About what my mother said, about how Sophia felt. I thought she knew how much I loved her. I thought that was enough." "Love isn't always enough," Elena said quietly. "Not when fear gets in the way. Not when people are convinced they're not worthy of it." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How did she die?" Elena had known this question was coming, but it still felt like a knife twisting in her gut. "Preeclampsia. It turned into eclampsia during labor. She had a seizure, and—" Elena swallowed hard. "They managed to deliver Lily safely, but Sophia's blood pressure wouldn't stabilize. She hemorrhaged. They did everything they could, but—" "She died alone," Marcus finished, his voice hollow. "She died alone because I wasn't there. Because she never told me. She wasn't alone." Elena's voice was fierce now. "I was there. I held her hand. And before she went into surgery, she told me to tell Lily every day that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was the best thing that ever happened to her." She paused. "And she told me to give Lily the pendant when she was old enough to understand what it meant. To tell her it represented family and love and finding your way home." Marcus turned back to face her, and the devastation on his face nearly broke Elena's composure. "She kept it," he whispered. "All that time, she kept my grandmother's compass. She wore it every single day until she went into the hospital. It was the only thing of yours she took with her when she left." They both looked at Lily then, at this little girl who was the living proof of a love story that had ended in tragedy. Lily had her head tilted to one side, giggling at something on the screen, her small hand reaching up absently to touch the pendant at her throat. The same gesture Sophia used to make. "I want to know her," Marcus said suddenly, desperately. "I want?" "I have a daughter. I have a daughter I've never met. And I—" He stopped, looking lost. "What do I do? How do I—" "I don't know," Elena admitted. Because she didn't. She'd spent 6.5 years preparing for this moment in theory. But the reality was messier and more complicated than she'd ever imagined. "But Marcus, you need to understand something. To Lily, I'm her mother. I'm the only parent she's ever known. And you're a stranger. A very powerful, very intimidating stranger." She watched him process that, watched him realize the full scope of what had been stolen from him, and what couldn't be easily reclaimed. "I lost 7 years," Marcus said, and the anguish in his voice was palpable. 7 years of her life. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. All of it. Gone. "I know." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks now, couldn't stop them anymore. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Marcus, we can't get those years back. We can only move forward from here." "How?" He looked at her like she had the answers, like she could fix this impossible situation. "How do we move forward from this?" Elena wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. "We start with the truth. We tell Lily, carefully and gently, that you're her father. We give her time to understand and adjust. And we figure out what kind of relationship you two can build at a pace that works for her." "I want," Marcus started, but Elena held up her hand. "I know what you want. You want to make up for lost time. You want to be her father, immediately and completely. But it doesn't work that way. You're going to have to earn her trust, Marcus, and mine." He looked like he wanted to argue, but then his gaze shifted to Lily again, and something in his expression softened. "What does she know about me? About her father? She knows her daddy loved her mama very much. She knows he didn't know about her because her mama was scared. And she knows that wherever he is, he would love her if he knew she existed." Elena's voice caught. "Those are the words Sophia made me promise to say. Every night before bed, for 7 years." Marcus's eyes closed, and Elena saw a tear slide down his cheek. This man, who commanded empires, was crying in his office because of a daughter he'd just discovered, and a love he'd lost years ago. "I would have," he said hoarsely. "I would have loved her. I would have loved them both." "I believe you," Elena said softly. "And now you get the chance to prove it." Marcus opened his eyes, and there was a determination there that Elena recognized. It was the same fierce focus he probably brought to every business deal, every corporate battle. But this wasn't business. This was a 6-year-old girl who liked stuffed rabbits and fairy tales and didn't know that the tall man staring at her with tears in his eyes was about to change her entire world. "What do I do?" Marcus asked again, but this time it wasn't a general question. It was specific, immediate. "Right now. What do I do?" Elena took a breath. "Right now, you go back to your board meeting. You present your merger. You do your job. And tonight, you go home and think about what you want this to look like. Tomorrow, we'll sit down, the two of us, and make a plan. A real plan, with therapists and lawyers and whatever else we need to do this right. I don't want to wait." "Marcus," Elena's voice was firm, "Lily has no idea who you are. If you go over there right now and tell her you're her father, you will scare her. Is that what you want?" He looked tormented, but he shook his head. "Then we do this carefully. We do this right, for her sake." Marcus nodded slowly, but his eyes never left Lily. And Elena could see what this was costing him, every instinct screaming at him to go to his daughter, to hold her, to somehow make up for 7 years of absence in a single moment. But he stayed where he was. And that, more than anything else, gave Elena a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Marcus Chen could learn to put someone else's needs before his own ambitions. After all, maybe. Marcus didn't remember driving home that night. The board meeting had happened. He must have presented, must have answered questions, because the merger was approved, and 3 board members had congratulated him on his excellent vision. But he couldn't recall a single word he'd said. His mind had been 42 floors away, replaying the conversation with Elena Rodriguez on an endless loop. Sophia died. The words echoed in his head as he rode the elevator up to his penthouse. As he pushed open the door to the space that had felt like a sanctuary and now felt like a mausoleum. The city lights sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, millions of dollars worth of view, and all he could think was that Sophia would never see it. She'd never stand here with him, never tease him about his obsessive need for minimalist furniture or his color-coded closet. She'd never breathe again. Marcus set his briefcase down by the door, a habit, muscle memory, and walked slowly into the living room. Everything was exactly as he'd left it this morning, exactly as it had been for years. Clean lines, expensive art that some consultant had chosen, furniture that was beautiful and uncomfortable and never used because Marcus was never here long enough to use it. He'd built this life so carefully, every piece in its perfect place, and underneath it all, a daughter had been growing up without him. Marcus poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, 18-year-old single malt that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week, and stood at the window, staring at the city. Seattle sprawled below him, lights twinkling like earthbound stars, and somewhere out there, Lily Sophia Rodriguez was probably being tucked into bed, in an apartment Marcus had never seen, reading bedtime stories he'd never heard, living a life he wasn't part of. His daughter. The word felt foreign and terrifying and precious all at once. He had a daughter, a little girl with dark hair and his grandmother's eyes and Sophia's smile. He'd seen that smile today, just once, when Elena had whispered something to Lily and the child had giggled. The sound had pierced straight through his chest. Marcus took a long drink, felt the burn of alcohol, and let himself do something he hadn't done in 7 years. He let himself remember. He'd met Sophia on a Tuesday. Funny how Tuesdays kept destroying his life. It had been 8 years ago, back when Chen Industries was just starting to explode, when Marcus was working 100-hour weeks and running on coffee and ambition. His executive assistant had quit. Something about work-life balance, and Marcus being emotionally unavailable, whatever that meant. And HR had sent up a replacement. Sophia Martinez had walked into his office, wearing a department store suit that didn't quite fit right, and the most determined expression Marcus had ever seen. She was 25, fresh out of community college, and desperately underqualified for the position. Her resume had been sparse. A few administrative jobs, a gap year where she'd worked 3 part-time positions simultaneously, no prestigious schools or family connections. He'd meant to send her away, to tell HR to find someone more appropriate, someone who wouldn't embarrass him in front of clients. But then she'd looked him dead in the eye and said, "I know I'm not what you're expecting, Mr. Chen, but I work harder than anyone you'll ever meet. I learn fast, and I will never let you down. Give me 2 weeks to prove it. If I'm not the best assistant you've ever had by then, I'll leave quietly." The audacity of it had stunned him, and maybe, just maybe, it had reminded him of himself at that age. Hungry, determined, clawing his way up from nowhere. He'd given her the 2 weeks. She'd lasted 3 years. For the first 6 months, their relationship had been purely professional. Sophia was everything she'd promised. Efficient, intuitive, always 3 steps ahead of what Marcus needed. She managed his impossible schedule, dealt with his temperamental moods, and somehow made the chaos of his life run smoothly. She never complained when he called at midnight or sent emails at 4 a.m. Never pushed back when he demanded the impossible. She just delivered. Marcus had respected that. Respected her, but he'd never looked at her as anything more than an exceptionally competent employee, until the night she'd stayed late to help him prepare for a presentation that could make or break the company's future. It was past midnight. The office was dark except for the conference room where they'd spread out charts and projections and marketing materials. Marcus had been running on 3 hours of sleep for the past week, and his temper was fraying. Nothing was working. The numbers weren't adding up the way he needed them to, and the presentation kept feeling hollow, unconvincing. He'd slammed his hand on the table in frustration, scattering papers. "This is garbage, all of it. If I walk into that boardroom tomorrow with this, we're done." "Then don't." He'd turned to stare at Sophia. "Excuse me?" She'd looked scared. He could see her hands trembling slightly. But she'd squared her shoulders and met his gaze. "Don't present the numbers first. Don't lead with data. Lead with the story. This is business, not a fairy tale. Everything's a story, Mr. Chen." Her voice had gotten stronger, more confident. "You're not just selling a product. You're selling a vision, a future. So tell them what that future looks like. Make them feel it before you make them think about it." And God help him, she'd been right. They'd spent the next 4 hours rebuilding the presentation from the ground up. Sophia had a way of framing things that Marcus had never considered, finding the human element in the cold machinery of business. By the time dawn started creeping through the windows, they had something that didn't just look good on paper. It sang Marcus had gotten the funding. The company had skyrocketed, and he'd started seeing Sophia differently. It wasn't sudden, not some lightning bolt moment of recognition. It was gradual, insidious, the way he'd started noticing how she hummed quietly to herself when she was concentrating, the way she'd bring him coffee exactly how he liked it without being asked, the way she'd smile at him, just a little quirk of her lips, when he was being particularly difficult, like she could see right through his walls and found him amusing rather than intimidating. The way she made his sterile, controlled life feel less empty. He'd fought it. God, he'd fought it. Dating employees was a disaster waiting to happen. His father had drilled that into him from day one. Keep business and pleasure separate. Never mix the two. But Sophia had been impossible to resist. It had started with working dinners that turned into real dinners, late nights at the office that ended with them talking about everything except work. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Sophia had told him about growing up in foster care, about her younger sister, Elena, who she'd fought to keep in contact with, about the desperate determination to never be poor and powerless again. Marcus had told her things he'd never told anyone, about the pressure of being his father's only son, about the crushing weight of expectations, about how sometimes he'd look at his life and wonder if he'd built a prison instead of an empire. "Then tear it down," she'd said simply. "If it's a prison, walk away. It's not that easy. Yes, it is. You're just scared." She'd been right about that, too. He'd been terrified of failing, of disappointing his father, of discovering that without the company, without the success, he was nobody. "You're somebody to me," Sophia had said softly. "Not because of what you've built. Because of who you are when you're not trying so hard to be Marcus Chen, CEO. When you're just Marcus." He'd kissed her that night. In his office, surrounded by contracts and quarterly reports, and all the trappings of the life he'd built. And for the first time in years, Marcus had felt like he could breathe. Their relationship had been a secret at first. They'd both known how it would look. The powerful CEO dating his assistant, the cliché of it, the power dynamic. But behind closed doors, away from the office politics and whispered judgments, they'd been happy. God, they'd been so happy. Sophia had this way of making him laugh, of pulling him out of his own head. She'd drag him to hole-in-the-wall restaurants he'd never have found on his own, make him watch terrible romantic comedies, force him to take actual days off. She'd taught him that life existed outside of spreadsheets and stock prices, and he'd fallen in love with her. Completely. Irrevocably. In a way that terrified him because it gave someone else the power to destroy him. They'd been together for 2 years. Marcus had been planning to propose. He'd bought the ring 3 months before she disappeared. A simple sapphire because Sophia had once told him diamonds felt too expected. He'd been working up the courage to ask her, picking the perfect moment, when she'd just vanished. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. One day she was there, laughing at something he'd said, kissing him goodbye before she left for her own apartment. The next day, her desk was cleared out, her phone disconnected, her apartment abandoned. Marcus had gone insane trying to find her. He'd hired private investigators, called everyone she knew, which admittedly wasn't many people, tried to file a missing persons report only to be told that adults had the right to disappear if they wanted to, and after 6 months of dead ends and silence, he'd finally accepted that Sophia had chosen to leave, that whatever they'd had, it hadn't been enough for her to stay. He'd buried the pain under work, under acquisitions and mergers and 18-hour days. He'd convinced himself he was fine, that it had just been a relationship, and relationships ended all the time. He'd lied to himself for 7 years. Marcus drained his glass and poured another. His hand was shaking. Sophia hadn't left him. She'd been scared, terrified actually, and instead of coming to him, she'd run. She'd carried their child, given birth alone, and died thinking he wouldn't want them. The injustice of it burned like acid in his chest. He could have been there, could have held Sophia's hand during doctor's appointments and felt the baby kick and been in the delivery room when Lily was born. Could have saved Sophia, maybe, somehow, if he'd just known, if she'd just trusted him, but she hadn't. And he couldn't blame her entirely, because hadn't he seen the way his mother had looked at Sophia? The way his father had dismissed her as that little assistant? The way his social circle had whispered about her humble background, like it was some kind of character flaw? He'd told himself it didn't matter, that their love was stronger than his family's prejudices, but he'd never actually stood up to them, had he? Never told his mother to back off, or his father to show respect. He'd just let it happen, let Sophia feel small and unwelcome and not enough, because addressing it would have been uncomfortable, because confronting his family would have caused drama, because it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to actually fight for what mattered. Marcus had always been good at that, at compartmentalizing, at keeping different parts of his life in separate boxes, business in one box, personal life in another. Never let them touch, and now he was paying the price. A daughter who didn't know him, a woman he'd loved buried in the ground. 7 years of memories that belonged to someone else. Marcus looked around his empty penthouse, at the life he'd built so carefully, and realized that Elena had been right earlier. Love wasn't always enough, not when you were too much of a coward to actually fight for it. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in the small bedroom of her apartment, the one Lily didn't occupy, with its second-hand furniture and the curtains that didn't quite close all the way, and stared at the ceiling. Down the hall, Lily was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around Mr. Buttons, her stuffed rabbit. She'd gone down easily tonight, chattering about the very tall man she'd met at Mommy's office who'd looked at her funny but nice. If only she knew. Elena rolled onto her side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. The apartment was cold. It was always cold because Elena kept the thermostat low to save money, but she barely noticed. Her mind was 7 years in the past, reliving the worst and best day of her life. Sophia had called her at 3 in the morning. "Elena? Elena, I need you." Elena had been living in a studio apartment barely big enough to turn around in, working as a waitress and taking night classes, but she'd driven 2 hours to the hospital in Tacoma, where Sophia had checked in under a fake name. Her sister had been 6 months pregnant. How had she hidden it so well? And terrified. "I can't do this," Sophia had sobbed, gripping Elena's hand so hard it left bruises. "I can't be a mother. I'm going to ruin everything. I'm going to—" "Stop." Elena had stroked Sophia's hair, the way she'd done when they were kids, and Sophia had nightmares. "You're going to be an amazing mother. You're strong, Soph. You always have been. I'm a coward." Sophia's face had been blotchy with tears. "I ran away from the one person who actually loved me because I was too scared to believe it was real." Elena had wanted to argue, to tell Sophia she could still go back, could still tell Marcus Chen the truth. But Sophia had been adamant. She'd made her choice, and she was going to live with it, or die with it. As it turned out, the latter. The pregnancy had been complicated from the start. Sophia's blood pressure had been consistently high, and the doctors had warned about preeclampsia. But she'd refused to let Elena contact Marcus, even when things got bad, especially when things got bad. "Promise me," Sophia had gasped, 3 months later, when the contractions had started, and the machines had begun beeping their urgent warnings. "Promise me you'll take care of her. Promise me you'll love her like she's yours. Sophia, don't—" "Promise me, Elena." Sophia's grip had been vice-tight, desperate. "And promise me you won't tell him. He has his life, his perfect, successful life. I won't trap him with a responsibility he never wanted. That's not fair to him. Or to her. Promise me!" And because Elena loved her sister more than anything, because Sophia was all the family she'd ever really had, she'd promised. 6 hours later, Lily Sofia Rodriguez had entered the world screaming and perfect and alive, and Sophia had bled out on an operating table, whispering Marcus's name with her last breath. Elena had been 25 years old, barely scraping by and suddenly responsible for an infant. The hospital social workers had wanted to call child services, had questioned whether Elena was equipped to care for a newborn. But she'd fought like hell, proved she had a job and an apartment, and a sister's dying wish to honor. They'd let her take Lily home. The first year had been a nightmare. Elena had dropped out of her classes, taken a second job, learned to function on 3 hours of sleep. She'd figured out how to make formula and change diapers and soothe a crying baby while her own tears soaked into Lily's blanket. She'd mourned Sophia while simultaneously falling in love with this tiny person who had Sophia's nose and Marcus Chen's eyes. She'd kept the pendant. Sophia had been wearing it in the hospital, had clutched it during labor like a talisman. The nurses had removed it before surgery, and Elena had slipped it into her pocket. Some instinct had told her it was important, that it meant something beyond its monetary value. Later, going through Sophia's few possessions, Elena had found the journal, pages and pages of entries about Marcus Chen, about how Sophia had fallen in love despite her better judgment, about the grandmother's compass Marcus had given her, telling her it was a family heirloom, hundreds of years old, meant to guide the bearer home. "I don't have a home," Sophia had written, "but when I'm with him, I feel like I could. Like maybe I'm not just a girl from nowhere. Like maybe I deserve good things after all." Elena had cried reading that journal, had wanted to scream at her sister's ghost for being so stubborn, so proud, so convinced she wasn't worthy of love. And then she'd looked at baby Lily, at this innocent child who'd done nothing except be born, and she'd made a decision. She would be Lily's home. She would give this little girl everything Sophia had been too scared to claim. Stability, love, a sense of belonging, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams, even if it meant working 3 jobs and living in a 1-bedroom apartment and never having money for anything except necessities. If it meant lying to a man who deserved to know his Daughter existed over the years. Elena had convinced herself she'd made the right choice. She'd told herself that Marcus Chen wouldn't want to be burdened with a child from a dead girlfriend, that he'd moved on, built his empire even higher, and was probably dating socialites who fit into his world. In a way Sophia never had. She'd told herself that Lily was better off with her, with someone who loved her, unconditionally rather than a father who might see her as an obligation. But deep down, Elena had always known the truth. She'd kept Lily secret because it was easier. Because telling Marcus would have meant sharing custody, would have meant losing some of the time with the little girl who'd become the center of her world. It would have meant confronting a man with unimaginable power and hoping he didn't decide to take everything. Because that's what rich people did, wasn't it? They took what they wanted and crushed anyone who got in their way. At least, that's what Elena had told herself. But seeing Marcus's face today, seeing the raw devastation when he learned about Sophia, the desperate longing when he looked at Lily, Elena had realized something that made her stomach churn with guilt. She'd been wrong. Marcus Chen wasn't the villain she'd built up in her mind. He was just a man who'd lost the woman he loved and never knew why. A man who'd been robbed of 7 years with his daughter because 2 scared women had decided he couldn't be trusted with the truth. And now, Elena had to figure out how to make this right. How to give Marcus his daughter without losing hers. Because that's what Lily was. Hers. In every way that mattered except biology, Elena was Lily's mother. She'd been there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee. She taught Lily to read, to tie her shoes, to be brave. She'd held her during thunderstorms and celebrated every small victory, and loved her with a fierceness that sometimes scared Elena with its intensity. And now Marcus wanted to know his daughter, wanted to be her father, which meant Elena's carefully constructed world was about to be torn apart. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Elena grabbed it, squinting at the too bright screen. It was an email from Marcus Chen, sent at 2:30 in the morning. Elena, I can't stop thinking about what you told me today. About Sophia, about Lily, about everything I missed. I want to hate you for keeping this from me, for letting 7 years pass while my daughter grew up without me. But I understand why you did it. Or I'm trying to understand. You said we need to do this carefully, that we need a plan. You're right. But I need you to understand something too. That little girl is my daughter, and I will do everything in my power to be the father she deserves. Not because of obligation or guilt or trying to make up for lost time, but because the moment I saw her, something in me that I thought had died years ago came back to life. I won't fight you. I won't try to take her away. But I won't be shut out either. We need to find a way to make this work. For Lily's sake, can we meet tomorrow? Not at the office. Somewhere neutral. So we can talk about what comes next. Marcus Elena read the email 3 times, feeling her throat get tight. She'd expected anger, demands, maybe even threats. But this was honest, vulnerable. The words of a man who'd had his entire world rocked and was trying to find his balance. She typed out a response, Marcus, tomorrow. There's a coffee shop on Pike Street called The Daily Grind, 7 a.m. before work. We can talk, but I need you to promise me something. When we tell Lily, we do it together, and we let her set the pace. She's 6 years old, and this is going to change her entire world. We have to put her needs first. Always. Can you do that? Elena. The response came back almost immediately. I can do that. I have to. Elena set her phone down and closed her eyes. But sleep still wouldn't come. Because tomorrow, everything was going to change. And she had no idea if they were about to build something beautiful or destroy it all trying. The Daily Grind was the kind of coffee shop that catered to the pre-dawn crowd, shift workers and insomniacs, and people trying to outrun their demons with caffeine. Marcus arrived at 6:45, which was early even by his standards, but he hadn't been able to wait any longer. He'd been up since 4, had gone for a 10-mile run trying to clear his head, and had still felt like his chest was being crushed by an invisible weight. He ordered a black coffee he didn't want and sat at a corner table where he could watch the door. The morning light was just starting to creep over the city, painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. Marcus wrapped his hands around the paper cup, feeling the heat seep into his palms, and tried to organize his thoughts into something coherent. He'd spent the entire night researching custody laws, paternity rights, what happened when a father discovered a child he hadn't known existed. His lawyer had been less than pleased to receive a call at 11 p.m., but Marcus didn't care. He needed to understand the legal landscape before he walked into this conversation, but the law was only part of it. The bigger question, the one that had kept him up long after he'd finished reading statutes and case precedents, was simpler and infinitely more complicated. What kind of father did he want to be? Marcus had never thought much about children. It had always been an abstract concept, something that would happen eventually in the distant future when he'd checked all the right boxes, married the right person, secured the company's position, reached whatever undefined milestone would signal he was ready. But life didn't wait for you to be ready. The bell above the door chimed, and Elena walked in. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. She spotted Marcus immediately and made her way over, stopping at the counter only long enough to order a large coffee with what sounded like 4 shots of espresso. "Rough night?" Marcus asked when she sat down across from him. "I've had better." Elena wrapped both hands around her cup, mirroring Marcus's posture. For a moment, they just sat there, 2 exhausted people who'd been thrown together by circumstance and were trying to figure out how to navigate the wreckage. "I meant what I said in the email," Marcus started. "I don't want to fight you. I want to figure this out." Elena nodded slowly. "I know, and I owe you an apology, a real one. I should have told you years ago, should have found a way. But I was scared, and I was angry at Sophia for dying, and Her voice cracked. "I convinced myself I was protecting Lily, but maybe I was just protecting myself." The honesty of it caught Marcus off guard. He'd expected defensiveness, justifications, not this raw vulnerability. "Why were you angry at Sophia?" he asked quietly. Elena's laugh was bitter. "Because she left me. Because she was my big sister, the one who'd always protected me. And she went and died, and stuck me with a responsibility I wasn't ready for. Because she made me promise to keep this secret. And then she wasn't around to help me keep it." She wiped at her eyes roughly. "That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Being angry at a dead woman." "No," Marcus said. "It sounds human." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the coffee shop filling the space between them. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other early morning patrons, the scrape of chairs against worn linoleum. "Tell me about her," Marcus said finally. "Tell me about Lily. I need to know who she is." Elena's expression softened, the way it always did when she talked about Lily. Marcus had seen it yesterday in the office, the fierce, protective love that radiated from this woman when she looked at his daughter. Their daughter, he corrected himself. Even if the law and biology said Lily was his, Elena had earned that title through 6.5 years of showing up. "She's smart," Elena said. "Scary smart, actually. She's reading at a 4th grade level already. Loves math, which she definitely didn't get from me. She has this way of seeing patterns in things, of figuring out how things work." She smiled. "She took apart my alarm clock last month because she wanted to understand why it made that ticking sound. I was mad for about 5 seconds until she explained the mechanism to me in perfect detail. She's 6 years old, Marcus, and she's already thinking like an engineer." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Pride, maybe, or loss. "She got that from me," he said quietly. I used to do the same thing. Drove my parents crazy. Yeah, well, I'm already saving for her college fund. At this rate, she'll probably skip a few grades. Elena's smile faded slightly. She's also sensitive, really sensitive. She cries during sad commercials. She brings home every stray animal she finds. Last week, she tried to rescue a bee that was drowning in a puddle and got stung for her trouble. Cried more about the bee dying than about her own finger hurting. She has your kindness, Marcus said, and meant it. Elena shook her head. She has Sophia's kindness. I'm just trying not to screw it up. You haven't. Marcus surprised himself with how much he meant that. You've clearly done an incredible job raising her. She seems happy, healthy. That's because of you. It should have been both of us. Elena's voice was thick with emotion. It should have been you and Sophia raising her together. I stole that from you, and I'm sorry. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say that Sophia had made the choice, that Elena had just honored her sister's wishes. But the truth was more complicated than that. They'd all made choices. Sophia, Elena, even Marcus himself in the way he'd let his family treat the woman he loved. And Lily had paid the price. We can't change the past, Marcus said, but we can control what happens next. So let's talk about that. What does the future look like? Elena took a long drink of her coffee, like she was fortifying herself. First, we need to get a paternity test. I know she's yours. God, anyone with eyes can see she's yours, but legally, we need documentation. Marcus nodded. He'd already researched that too. Agreed. Second, we need to tell Lily, but carefully. Maybe with a child psychologist present, someone who can help her process this. When? Soon, Elena said. Before someone else tells her. Before she hears it as gossip or sees something online or... She stopped, shaking her head. The longer we wait, the worse it'll be. This weekend, Marcus said decisively. I'll hire the best child psychologist in the city. We'll do it together, the way you said. Elena looked surprised by how quickly he'd agreed, but she nodded. Okay, this weekend. And after that? Marcus leaned forward. After we tell her what happens. Do I get to see her? Talk to her? Or do I have to wait for some court-mandated schedule? Marcus, I'm not trying to be aggressive, he said quickly. I'm just trying to understand what my rights are here, what I'm allowed to expect. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying him like she was trying to read his intentions. Finally, she said, What do you want? Honestly, I want to know my daughter. The words came out more desperate than Marcus intended. I want to be part of her life. I want to take her to school and help with homework and teach her. God, I don't know what. Whatever fathers teach their daughters. I want to stop being a stranger to her. That's going to take time, Elena said gently. You can't just jump from 0 to full-time dad overnight. She doesn't know you. You're going to have to build that relationship slowly. I know. Marcus did know intellectually. But every instinct in him was screaming to make up for lost time immediately. But I can start now, right? I can start trying? Yes, Elena said. But on Lily's timeline, not yours. If she's overwhelmed, we pull back. If she needs space, we give her space. Her emotional well-being comes first. Always. I can agree to that. Elena studied him again, and Marcus had the distinct feeling he was being tested. Can you? Really? Because Marcus, you're used to controlling everything. Used to people doing what you want, when you want it. But children don't work that way. Lily doesn't work that way. You can't CEO your way through parenting. The words stung, partly because they were true. Marcus had built his entire life around control, around measurable outcomes and strategic planning. But this wasn't a business deal. This was a 6-year-old girl who didn't owe him anything, who had every right to reject him if she wanted to. I'll learn, Marcus said quietly. I'll screw up, probably a lot, but I'll learn. Just give me the chance. Elena's expression softened. I will. But Marcus, you need to understand something else. I'm Lily's mother. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. And I'm not going anywhere. If you're expecting me to step aside now that you know about her, I'm not. Marcus interrupted. I would never ask you to do that. You raised her. You're her family. I just want to be family too. He saw Elena's shoulders relax slightly, like she'd been bracing for a fight, and was relieved not to get one. Okay, she said. Then we figure out how to do this together. Co-parenting, or whatever the word is for this situation. Shared custody? Marcus suggested. Elena flinched. Eventually, maybe, but not right away. For now, Lily lives with me. You get supervised visits until she's comfortable with you. We build from there. Every instinct in Marcus rebelled against that. Supervised visits like he was some kind of threat. But he forced himself to see it from Elena's perspective. She'd been Lily's only parent for 6 years. Letting a stranger, even a biological father, into that dynamic was terrifying. Okay, he said, though it physically hurt to agree. Supervised visits. For now. Elena looked surprised again, like she'd expected more of a fight. Really? Really? But Elena, I need you to promise me something too. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Don't shut me out. Don't make decisions about Lily without talking to me first. I know I don't have a right to ask for that yet, but I want us to be partners in this. Not adversaries, partners, Elena repeated slowly, like she was testing the word. Then she nodded. Okay, partners. But Marcus, if you do anything that hurts Lily, emotionally, physically, anything, I will end you. I don't care how much money you have or how powerful you are. I will destroy your entire world to protect her. Do you understand? Marcus believed her. There was a ferocity in Elena's voice that reminded him of Sophia, of the fierce determination that had drawn him to her in the first place. I understand, he said, and I wouldn't expect anything less. They finished their coffees, talking through logistics. The paternity test. Marcus would arrange it through a private lab that could guarantee discretion. The child psychologist, Elena, had someone in mind, a specialist in family transitions. The conversation with Lily, scheduled for Saturday morning, in Elena's apartment, where Lily would feel safe. By the time they left the coffee shop, the sun was fully up, and the city was waking around them. Marcus felt simultaneously exhausted and wired, like he'd just run a marathon and was about to start another one. Marcus, Elena said, as they stood on the sidewalk, about to go their separate ways. Thank you for being reasonable about this. I was expecting, well, I don't know what I was expecting. But not this. What can I say? Marcus tried for a smile. You bring out my better angles. Elena didn't smile back. I hope so. Because Lily deserves the best version of you. Not the corporate shark, not the ruthless CEO, just a father who loves her. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing on the sidewalk with the weight of 7 years, pressing down on his shoulders. He had 3 days to figure out how to be a father. He had no idea where to start. Saturday morning arrived, with the kind of rain that seems uniquely designed to match the mood. Not a thunderstorm, just a steady, relentless drizzle that made the world gray and uncertain. Marcus had been awake since 4 a.m., going over what he wanted to say to Lily about 1,000 times in his head. Each version felt wrong, too formal, too casual, too desperate. How did you tell a 6-year-old that you were her father? That you'd missed her entire life, not by choice, but by tragic circumstance? That you wanted to know her, but understood she might not want to know you? Dr. Sarah Reeves, the child psychologist Elena had recommended, had given Marcus a prep session on Friday afternoon. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded him slightly of Sandra Morrison. The most important thing, Dr. Reeves had said, is to let Lily lead. Answer her questions honestly, but age-appropriately. Don't overwhelm her with emotion. Children can be frightened by excessive adult feelings. And remember, this isn't about you. It's about her. Marcus had nodded, taking mental notes like he was preparing for a board presentation. But this wasn't business. This was his daughter's emotional well-being. No pressure. Now, standing outside Elena's apartment building at 9 a.m., with rain dripping down his neck, Marcus felt more nervous than he'd ever been in his life. More nervous than his first major pitch. More nervous than any of the dozens of high-stakes meetings that had defined his career. Because none of those things had mattered, like this mattered. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 3C. "Come on up." Elena's voice came through the intercom, tight with tension. The building was old but clean, the kind of place where working-class families scraped together rent every month and hoped nothing broke because they couldn't afford repairs. Marcus rode the elevator up. It creaked alarmingly and found Elena waiting in the hallway outside her door. She looked as nervous as he felt. "Dr. Reeves is already here. Lily thinks she's just a friend of mine who wanted to meet her. We thought it would be less intimidating that way." "Good idea." Marcus's voice came out hoarse. He cleared his throat. "How is she?" "Excited. She thinks you're coming over to talk about a special project at work. She's been drawing pictures all morning." Elena paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Marcus, if this gets too overwhelming, for her or for you, we stop. We can always try again another day." "I understand." Elena studied his face for a moment longer, then nodded and opened the door. The apartment was small but warm. Mismatched furniture that had clearly been collected over time from thrift stores and yard sales, drawings covering the refrigerator, childish sketches of flowers and animals and houses with too many windows, a worn couch with blankets folded neatly on one arm, bookshelves crammed with paperbacks and children's books. It looked like a home, more of a home than Marcus's sterile penthouse had ever been. And sitting on the floor in the middle of the living room, surrounded by crayons and paper, was Lily. She looked up when Marcus entered, and her face split into a smile. "You're the tall man from Mommy's work." Marcus felt his heart stutter. She'd called Elena Mommy, and why wouldn't she? Elena was her mother in every way that counted, but hearing it still felt like a small knife between his ribs. "That's right," Marcus managed, returning her smile. "My name is Marcus. It's nice to see you again, Lily. I'm drawing a picture of Mr. Buttons." She held up a paper covered in pink and white scribbles that might have been a rabbit. "Do you want to see?" "I'd love to." Marcus crouched down. His knees protested. When had he gotten so old? And examined the drawing seriously. "That's a very handsome rabbit. The ears are particularly well done," Lily beamed. "Thank you. Mommy says I'm good at art. Are you good at art?" "Not really," Marcus admitted. "I'm better with numbers." "Me too." Lily's enthusiasm was infectious. "Numbers are easy. They make sense. Not like words. Words are tricky." Marcus felt that twist in his chest again. She was so much like him it was almost painful. "I always thought so too." Dr. Reeves spoke up from her seat in the armchair. "Lily, why don't we all sit on the couch? Mr. Marcus has something important he'd like to talk to you about." Lily's expression turned serious, that solemn, grown-up look children get when they sense important adult business. She climbed up onto the couch, tucking her legs under her, and Elena sat beside her. Marcus took the other side, leaving Dr. Reeves in the armchair position to observe. "Lily," Elena started, her voice gentle. "Do you remember what I told you about your daddy?" Lily nodded. "That he loved Mama very much, but he didn't know about me because Mama was scared." "That's right." Elena took a deep breath. "Well, sweetie, we found him. Your daddy. And he's here. He wants to meet you." Lily's eyes went wide. She looked around the room, like she expected someone else to appear. "Where?" "I'm right here, sweetheart." Marcus's voice was rough with emotion he couldn't quite control. "I'm your father." Lily stared at him, her small face going through a series of expressions too fast to track. Confusion, surprise, something that might have been hope. And then, unexpectedly, suspicion. "Prove it," she said. The demand was so unexpected that Marcus actually laughed. Prove it? Yeah, anyone could say they're my daddy. But how do I know it's true? Smart kid. God, she was a smart kid. Marcus glanced at Elena, who looked torn between amusement and concern. That's a very good question, Dr. Reeves interjected. It's okay to want proof, Lily. That's very wise of you. Can you tell Mr. Marcus what would convince you? Lily tilted her head, thinking. Then her hand went to the pendant at her throat, unconscious, automatic. Mommy Elena says this necklace came from my daddy, that he gave it to my mama because it was special. Do you know about the necklace? Marcus felt his throat close up. Yes, he managed. Yes, I know about it. That's my grandmother's compass. It's been in my family for a very long time. I gave it to your mama because... How did he explain this to a 6-year-old? Because I loved her, and because compasses help you find your way home. I wanted her to always be able to find her way back to me. Lily's fingers traced the edge of the compass. She kept it. Mommy Elena says Mama wore it every day. I'm glad. Marcus blinked hard against the tears threatening to fall. That means she remembered me, even when she was scared. Why was she scared? Lily's question was so earnest, so genuinely curious. Marcus looked at Elena, who nodded slightly. This was the hard part. Your mama thought I wouldn't want her, Marcus said carefully. She thought I would be angry about you or that I wouldn't want to be a father. But she was wrong. I would have wanted you both so much. If I'd known, I would have taken care of you. But you didn't know, Lily said, working through the logic. So it's not your fault. No, it's not my fault. And it's not your mama's fault either. She was just scared. And sometimes fear makes people do things that don't make sense. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious. Mommy Elena says you're very rich. Marcus couldn't help but laugh at the abrupt subject change. I have some money, yes. Are you going to take me away? Lily's voice was small suddenly, frightened. Because you have more money than Mommy Elena? Are you going to say she can't take care of me? And there it was, the fear at the heart of all this. Marcus felt his heart break at the terror in his daughter's eyes. No, he said it firmly, with all the conviction he could muster. No, Lily, I would never do that. Elena is your mother. She's taken care of you your whole life, and she loves you more than anything. I'm not here to take you away from her. I'm here because I want to be part of your life too, if you'll let me. How does that work? Lily looked between Marcus and Elena. How can I have two mommies and a daddy? Some families look different than others, Dr. Reeves said gently. Some kids live with both parents. Some live with one. Some live with grandparents or aunts or uncles. And some live with the people who love them most, even if it's not the traditional family structure. What matters isn't what the family looks like. It's that everyone loves and respects each other. Lily absorbed this, her face scrunched up in concentration. So you want to be my daddy, but I still live with Mommy Elena? Yes, Marcus said. That's exactly right. And we'd spend time together? Do things. Whatever you want. We could, I don't know. What do you like to do? I like the science museum, and the aquarium, and reading, and math games. Lily was warming up now, her suspicion fading into cautious excitement. And ice cream. I really like ice cream, Marcus smiled. I like all those things too, especially ice cream. What's your favorite flavor? Chocolate. With peanut butter. Lily's eyes lit up. That's mine too. Mommy Elena likes vanilla, which is boring. Hey, Elena protested, but she was smiling. They talked for another hour. Lily asked dozens of questions. What did Marcus do for work? Where did he live? Did he have any pets? Why were his shoes so shiny? Some questions were easy to answer. Others were harder. Do you have a wife? Lily asked at one point. No, Marcus said. I never got married. Why not? Because the only person I ever wanted to marry was your mama. And after she left, I never found anyone else who mattered that much. Lily considered this gravely. That's sad. Yeah, Marcus agreed. It is pretty sad. Well, now you have me, Lily said, with the simple logic of a child. So you're not alone anymore. And just like that, Marcus Chen, billionaire CEO, corporate titan, man who'd built an empire and conquered every goal he'd ever set, broke down crying in a cramped apartment in front of a 6-year-old girl. "I'm sorry," he managed, wiping at his eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But Lily had already climbed off the couch. She walked over to Marcus, looked up at him with those impossible eyes, his grandmother's eyes, his eyes, and held out Mr. Buttons. "You can hold him if you want," she said softly. "He's very good at making people feel better." Marcus took the worn, stuffed rabbit with trembling hands, holding it like it was made of glass. And Lily, this little girl he'd only just met, this daughter he hadn't known existed a week ago, climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay to be sad," she whispered. "Mommy Elena says it's okay to cry when you miss someone. Do you miss my mama?" "Yes," Marcus whispered back, holding his daughter for the first time in her life. "I miss her very much." "Me too. I never met her, but I still miss her." "Is that weird?" "No, sweetheart. That's not weird at all." They stayed like that for a long time, Marcus holding Lily while she held him back, both of them mourning a woman who'd loved them and left them and brought them together in her absence. When they finally pulled apart, Lily looked up at Marcus with a serious expression. "So if you're my daddy, what do I call you?" Marcus looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "What would you like to call me?" Lily thought about it. "Can I call you Daddy Marcus, so I know you're different from other daddies?" "I'd like that very much." Lily smiled, that same smile Sophia used to have, bright and unexpected. "Okay, Daddy Marcus, do you want to see my room? I have a rock collection." And just like that, as easily as a door opening, Marcus was let into his daughter's life. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There would be complications ahead, awkward moments, times when Lily wouldn't understand why her family was so different from her friends' families. There would be custody negotiations and legal paperwork and 1,000 small adjustments. But right now, following his daughter down a narrow hallway to see her rock collection, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. The weeks that followed were a strange new rhythm for all of them. Marcus had to learn what it meant to be a father in practice, not just theory. It turned out that being good at corporate strategy didn't translate to understanding a 6-year-old's emotional landscape. The first supervised visit outside of Elena's apartment was at the Science Museum, per Lily's request. Marcus had arrived 15 minutes early, pacing outside the entrance like he was waiting for the most important business meeting of his life. When Elena and Lily showed up, hand in hand, Marcus felt his heart do that stuttering thing it had been doing a lot lately. Daddy Marcus! Lily had run to him, and Marcus had crouched down to catch her in a hug that felt both natural and terrifying. Elena hung back, giving them space, but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Marcus appreciated that, the way she was trying to let him build a relationship with Lily while still being the safety net his daughter needed. Inside the museum, Lily dragged Marcus from exhibit to exhibit, chattering constantly about dinosaurs and space and the water cycle. Marcus found himself answering questions he'd never considered before. Why is the sky blue, Daddy Marcus? If you dug a hole all the way through the earth, where would you come out? How do fish breathe underwater, but we can't? Some questions he could answer. Others required him to admit he didn't know, which was a strange experience for a man who'd built a career on always having the right answer. But Lily didn't seem to mind his ignorance. She just pulled out her tablet, a gift from Elena that was covered in sparkly stickers, and looked up the answers herself, reading them aloud in her serious, grown-up voice. "You're very smart," Marcus said at one point, watching her puzzle through a complex explanation of photosynthesis. Lily shrugged. Mommy Elena says I get it from you. That you're a genius or something. I don't know about genius, Marcus said, feeling oddly embarrassed. But I do like solving problems. Me too. Lily's enthusiasm was boundless. When I grow up, I want to be a scientist. Or maybe an engineer. Or maybe both. You can be anything you want, Marcus said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They had lunch in the museum cafe. Lily insisted on chicken nuggets, which Marcus realized with some chagrin he'd probably never eaten as an adult, and talked about everything and nothing. Lily told him about school, about her best friend Emma, who was super nice but sometimes bossy, about the book series she was reading that involved magic and dragons. Marcus told her about his work, translating the complex world of technology and business into terms a 6-year-old could understand. He talked about solving puzzles and building things and making sure people had jobs they loved. "Do you love your job?" Lily asked, tilting her head in that way she had. Marcus paused. It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Did he love his job? He'd devoted his entire adult life to the company, had sacrificed relationships and personal time and his own happiness in service of building Chen Industries. But did he love it? "I used to," he said honestly. "But lately, I've been thinking maybe I love other things more." "Like what?" "Like this," Marcus said softly. "Like spending time with you." Lily smiled and went back to her chicken nuggets, apparently satisfied with that answer. But the question lingered in Marcus's mind. When had his work stopped being fulfilling? When had the meetings and acquisitions and endless strategic planning started feeling empty? Maybe around 7 years ago, a traitorous voice in his head suggested. Maybe around the time Sophia left, and you threw yourself into work to avoid dealing with the pain. The paternity test results came back the following week. Not that anyone doubted them, but the legal documentation was necessary. Marcus stared at the paper that confirmed what his heart had known the moment he saw Lily. Probability of paternity. 99% she was his. Legally, officially, undeniably his daughter. Marcus had his lawyer draw up a custody agreement. Not because he wanted to fight Elena, but because they needed something official. Something that protected all of them. He offered joint legal custody with Elena retaining primary physical custody. He also set up a trust fund for Lily, enough to ensure she'd never want for anything, that she could go to any college she wanted, pursue any dream. Elena had protested the amount when he told her, "Marcus, this is too much. She doesn't need millions of dollars. It's not about need," Marcus had interrupted. "It's about making sure she has opportunities, making sure she never has to struggle the way you and Sophia did." Elena's eyes had filled with tears. "You really mean that?" "Of course I mean it. She's my daughter. And you—" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "You've given her everything already. Let me do this. Please." Elena had eventually agreed, though Marcus could tell it made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to accepting help, wasn't comfortable with the kind of money Marcus was offering, but she loved Lily enough to put aside her pride. That was something Marcus was learning about Elena. She'd do anything for Lily. Walk through fire, swallow her pride, trust a man she had every reason to resent. All because a dying woman had asked her to love a child that wasn't biologically hers. Marcus found himself respecting Elena more with each passing day. Found himself grateful that Lily had been raised by someone so fiercely devoted to her well-being. Not everything was smooth. There were difficult moments, times when the past cast long shadows over their tentative new family structure. Like the day Lily came home from school, crying because another kid had asked why her father had abandoned her. Elena called Marcus immediately, and he'd left a board meeting without explanation to rush to Elena's apartment. Lily had been curled up on the couch, her face blotchy with tears. "I told them you didn't abandon me," Lily hiccuped. "I told them you didn't know about me. But they said that was a dumb story, and that you probably just didn't want me. Marcus had felt rage, pure, incandescent rage, at whoever had made his daughter feel this way. But he forced it down, forced himself to be calm and present. "Lily, look at me." He'd sat beside her, waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. "I didn't abandon you. I didn't know you existed. But if I had known, if your mama had told me, I would have been there from the very first day. Do you understand that? But why didn't Mama tell you?" It was the question Lily had been dancing around for weeks. If she loved you, why did she keep me a secret? Marcus looked at Elena helplessly. This was the minefield they'd been dreading. How to explain Sophia's choices without making her the villain, without making Lily feel like she'd been a burden. Elena sat on Lily's other side, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Your mama was very young when she got pregnant with you. And she was scared. Not of you, never of you, but scared that she wouldn't be good enough, that she'd mess everything up. Sometimes, Mija, people make mistakes because they're afraid. That doesn't mean they don't love you." "But I made you sad," Lily whispered, looking at Marcus. "By existing, I made my mama so scared she ran away, and that made you sad." "No." Marcus's voice was fierce now. "Lily, you didn't make anyone sad by existing. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me. You understand? The absolute best thing. I'm only sad that I didn't get to know you sooner. But that's not your fault. It's not your mama's fault. It's just life. Sometimes life is complicated and messy, and people don't get the happy endings they deserve." "Did Mama deserve a happy ending?" Lily asked. "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "Your mama deserved the world. She deserved to watch you grow up, to see how smart and kind and amazing you are. She deserved to be happy, and I'm sorry she didn't get that chance." Lily had thrown herself into Marcus's arms then, crying into his shoulder while he held her, and promised her over and over that she was wanted. She was loved. She was enough. After Lily had cried herself out and fallen asleep on the couch, Marcus and Elena sat in the kitchen, drinking tea neither of them wanted. "This is going to keep happening," Elena said quietly. "Kids are cruel, and Lily's family situation is unconventional." "Then we'll deal with it," Marcus said. "Every time, however many times it takes. We'll remind her that she's loved, until she believes it so deeply that no one can make her doubt it." Elena studied him over her mug. "You've really changed, you know." "What do you mean?" "When I first started working at Chen Industries, I heard stories about you. The ruthless CEO who fired people without blinking. The man who cared more about quarterly earnings than anything else. But the person sitting in my kitchen, comforting our daughter." Elena shook her head. "That's not who I expected." Marcus thought about that. "Maybe I've always been this person," he said slowly. "I just never had a reason to show it before. Or maybe Lily is bringing out parts of me I didn't know existed." "Sophia would have liked this version of you," Elena said softly. "The one who puts his daughter first. Who shows up even when it's hard." The words hit Marcus harder than they should have, because he'd spent 7 years wondering what Sophia would think of the man he'd become after she left. The man who'd buried himself in work, who'd built his empire higher and higher, while his heart remained frozen. But this version of himself, the one who left board meetings to comfort a crying child, who learned about rock collections and dinosaurs, who put someone else's needs above his own. This was the version Sophia had hoped he could be. "I wish she could see Lily," Marcus said, his voice rough. "I wish she could know what an incredible kid she made." "Maybe she does," Elena said. "I'm not really religious, but I like to think Sophia's somewhere, watching, making sure we don't screw this up too badly." Marcus smiled despite himself. "She'd definitely have opinions about how we're handling this." "So many opinions," Elena agreed, and they both laughed. Soft, sad laughter that acknowledged the ghost in the room with them. Sophia would always be there, Marcus realized, in Lily's smile and stubborn streak, in the pendant that hung around his daughter's neck, in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Exactly like her mother used to, Sophia was gone, but she'd left behind the most important part of herself. And Marcus was going to spend the rest of his life making sure Lily knew how much she was loved. As the weeks turned into months, their new normal started to feel less strange and more like actual family. Marcus had standing dinner plans with Lily and Elena twice a week. Weekends were split. Lily would spend Saturday with Marcus and Sunday with Elena, or vice versa, depending on schedules. Marcus transformed one of the spare bedrooms in his penthouse into Lily's room. He'd wanted to hire an interior designer, but Elena had gently suggested that might be a bit much for a 6-year-old. Instead, he'd taken Lily to a furniture store and let her pick everything out herself. She'd chosen a bed shaped like a castle, walls painted purple like magic, and approximately 1,000,000 throw pillows. The room looked nothing like the rest of his minimalist apartment, and Marcus loved it. Lily had decorated it herself with drawings and her rock collection, and a bulletin board where she pinned photos. Most of them were of her and Elena, but there were a few now of her and Marcus, too. At the Science Museum, getting ice cream, reading together on the couch. Every time Marcus looked at those photos, he felt that twist in his chest. A good twist this time. The feeling of something broken starting to heal. He was learning who Lily was beyond the surface level. Learning that she was shy around new people but fierce once she felt comfortable. That she had nightmares sometimes. About her mama, about being alone. And the only thing that helped was someone holding her until she fell back asleep. That she hated carrots but loved broccoli, which made no sense to Marcus, but he'd learned not to question 6-year-old logic. He was also learning things about himself, like how he had apparently unlimited patience for Lily's endless questions, even though he'd snap at colleagues for wasting his time. Like how he didn't mind looking foolish if it made her laugh. He'd attempted an interpretive dance of the water cycle last week that had left Lily giggling so hard she couldn't breathe. Like how the best part of his day wasn't closing a deal or winning a negotiation. It was the moment when Lily would call him Daddy Marcus and reach for his hand. Simple, uncomplicated, pure, the kind of love that didn't need to be earned or strategized or negotiated. The kind of love Marcus had forgotten existed. Marcus should have known it was too good to last. Should have anticipated that his new life, this tentative, beautiful thing he was building with Lily and Elena, would eventually collide with his old one. The collision came in the form of his mother, Catherine. Chen had built her entire identity around being the matriarch of a successful family. She sat on the boards of 3 charities, hosted galas that raised millions, and wielded social power like a weapon. She'd been vocally disappointed when Marcus's marriage to a suitable woman had never materialized, and even more disappointed when he'd dated Sophia. Marcus had kept his mother at arm's length for years. Minimal contact, mostly limited to obligatory holiday dinners. It had been easier than constantly fighting her on every life choice, but keeping Lily a secret had been impossible. News traveled fast in Marcus's circles, and eventually someone had mentioned seeing him with a child. His mother had called immediately, demanding an explanation. Marcus had dodged her calls for 2 weeks, but Catherine Chen was nothing if not persistent. She showed up at his office on a Thursday afternoon, sweeping past Robert without waiting for an invitation. "Marcus!" She settled into the chair across from his desk like she owned it. "I think we need to talk." Marcus sighed and closed his laptop. "Hello, Mother." Catherine Chen was 65 and looked 50, thanks to a team of expensive professionals. She wore her signature pearls and a designer suit, every hair in place, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. I've been hearing very interesting rumors, she said, her tone ice-cold. Something about a daughter? Would you care to explain? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Her name is Lily. She's 6 years old. She's mine. And where exactly did this child come from? Did you forget to mention a pregnancy in one of our conversations? She's Sophia's daughter. Marcus watched his mother's face carefully. Sophia Martinez, my former assistant. The woman you told me was unsuitable breeding stock. Catherine had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, but she recovered quickly. I see. And you're only discovering this now? 7 years after the fact? Sophia left before she told me she was pregnant. She died in childbirth. Her sister Elena has been raising Lily. How convenient. Catherine's voice dripped with skepticism. And you verified this child is yours? With proper testing. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. She's my daughter. The paternity test confirmed it. Not that I needed confirmation. She looks exactly like grandmother's childhood photos. Even if she is yours biologically, Marcus, you need to think about what you're doing. Bringing an illegitimate child into the family. Don't! Marcus's voice was sharp enough to cut. Don't finish that sentence. Lily is not illegitimate. She's my daughter. And if you can't treat her with respect, then you won't be part of her life. Catherine's eyebrows rose. You're threatening me? Over some child you've known for a few months? She's not some child. She's my family. The most important person in my life. And yes, I'm absolutely threatening you. You don't get to poison her childhood the way you poisoned my relationship with Sophia. I did no such thing. You made Sophia feel worthless. You looked down on her every chance you got. You told her she wasn't good enough for this family. And you made sure she knew it. Marcus stood, his hands flat on the desk. She left because of you, Mother. Because she was so convinced I'd choose family obligation over her that she didn't even give me the chance to prove her wrong. So yes, you absolutely poisoned that relationship. And I'll be damned if I let you do the same thing to Lily. The silence that followed was glacial. Catherine Chen was not used to being spoken to this way, certainly not by her son. Marcus watched emotions flicker across her face. Shock, anger, and something that might have been hurt, though it was hard to tell. That's not fair, she said finally. I was trying to protect you, trying to ensure you married someone appropriate, someone who understood our world. I don't care about our world, Marcus interrupted. I care about my daughter. And if being part of your world means sacrificing my relationship with her, then I choose Lily. Every time. Catherine stood, her movements stiff with barely controlled fury. You're making a mistake, Marcus. Letting this girl and her guardian aunt manipulate you. Elena isn't manipulating anyone. She's been raising my daughter alone for 6 years. She's given Lily everything, with no help from anyone, and she's done a damn good job. So you will speak about her with respect, or you won't speak to me at all. You've become soft, Catherine said, and it sounded like an accusation. Weak. Your father would be ashamed. My father, Marcus said quietly, was so obsessed with legacy and reputation that he forgot what actually mattered. I won't make the same mistake. Catherine gathered her purse, her movements sharp with anger. When this blows up in your face, and it will, Marcus, don't come crying to me. I won't, Marcus promised. But Mother, if you change your mind, if you decide you want to actually know your granddaughter, she's an amazing kid. Smart, kind, funny. She's the best parts of Sophia and the best parts of me. You'd like her if you gave her a chance. For just a moment, something flickered in Catherine's eyes. But then her mask slipped back into place, and she turned and left without another word. Marcus sank back into his chair, his hands shaking slightly. He just essentially severed ties with his mother over a child he'd known for less than 3 months, and he didn't regret it even a little bit. But Catherine Chen didn't take rejection well. 3 days later, Marcus received a call from his lawyer. "We have a problem," James said without preamble. "Your mother has filed for grandparents' rights. She's suing for visitation with Lily." Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "She can't do that." "Actually, she can. Washington state law allows grandparents to petition for visitation rights in certain circumstances. And your mother has very expensive lawyers who are arguing that Lily deserves to know her entire family." "This is insane. She's never even met Lily." "I know. But Marcus, you need to prepare for a fight. Your mother is claiming that you're being manipulated by Elena Rodriguez, that an appropriate family structure hasn't been established, and that Lily deserves the stability of the Chen family legacy." Marcus wanted to put his fist through a wall. "How do we fight this?" "We demonstrate that Lily is happy, healthy, and thriving. We show that the current arrangement is in her best interest. And we pray that the judge sees through your mother's attempts to control the situation." After he hung up, Marcus sat in his office for a long time, staring at nothing. He needed to tell Elena, needed to prepare her for the legal battle that was coming. But first, he needed to make a decision. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Lily. And if being part of the Chen family meant subjecting his daughter to his mother's judgment and control, then maybe it was time to sever those ties completely. He told Elena that evening, over Chinese takeout in her kitchen, while Lily watched a movie in the living room. "She's doing what?" Elena's face went pale. "Filing for grandparents' rights. Essentially suing for the right to see Lily." Marcus pushed his food around his plate without eating. "I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this. Should have known my mother wouldn't just accept being shut out." "Can she win?" Elena's voice was tight with fear. "I don't know. My lawyer says it's an uphill battle for her. But she has resources. And she's vindictive enough to drag this out just to prove a point." Elena stood, pacing the small kitchen. "I can't afford a custody battle, Marcus. I have savings, but not enough to fight someone with your mother's money. She could bankrupt me." "You won't have to fight alone," Marcus said immediately. "I'm hiring the legal team. The best money can buy. And Elena, I want you to know, I'm on your side. Whatever my mother's lawyers try to claim, I will make it clear that you are Lily's mother and that I support the current custody arrangement." Elena stopped pacing, looking at him with something like wonder. "You'd do that? Publicly stand against your own mother?" "I already have," Marcus said. "I told her that if she couldn't respect you and Lily, she wasn't welcome in our lives. She chose to respond with legal action instead of reason. So, yes, I'll stand against her." Without hesitation, Elena sank back into her chair, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you trust me," Marcus said quietly. "Say you believe I'm doing this for the right reasons. Not to control Lily, but to protect her." "I do trust you," Elena said, and Marcus could see she meant it. "I didn't at first. But Marcus, you've shown up every single day. You've put Lily first, even when it cost you. So yes, I trust you." They talked for another hour, strategizing. The lawyer would need character references, people who could testify that Lily was thriving, that Elena was a good mother, that Marcus was a devoted father despite the unconventional circumstances. "What about Lily?" Elena asked finally. "Do we tell her?" "She's going to hear about this eventually." Marcus thought about that, about his daughter, who was probably singing along to her movie in the next room, blissfully unaware that her family was about to become a legal battlefield. "We tell her the truth," Marcus said, age-appropriately but honestly. "She deserves to know what's happening, and she deserves to know that we're handling it, that we're not going to let anyone hurt her." Elena nodded slowly. "When?" "Tomorrow. We'll sit down with her and Dr. Reeves and explain that some family members are confused right now, but that we're working it out." "Marcus," Elena reached across the table, putting her hand over his. "Thank you for fighting for her, for us." Marcus turned his hand over, gripping hers. "You don't have to thank me. This is what family does." And there it was, the word that had redefined itself over the past few months. Family wasn't blood or legal documents or traditional structures. Family was this: two people who'd been thrown together by tragedy and circumstance, figuring out how to protect a child they both loved. Marcus just hoped it would be enough to win this fight. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of legal preparation, of character witnesses being interviewed, of every aspect of Lily's life being scrutinized by lawyers and social workers and family court evaluators. 3 weeks of Lily asking questions. Marcus didn't know how to answer. "Why doesn't grandmother want to meet me first?" Lily had asked after they'd explained the situation. Before going to the judge, Marcus had exchanged a glance with Elena. "How did you tell a 6-year-old that some people were more interested in control than connection?" "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense," Marcus had said carefully. "My mother is used to things being done a certain way. She's having trouble understanding that our family works differently." "But we work good," Lily had insisted. "I'm happy." "You're happy. Mommy Elena's happy. Why isn't that enough?" "It should be," Marcus had said, pulling his daughter into a hug. "And we're going to make sure the judge knows that." Now, sitting in the courthouse waiting room, Marcus felt like he might throw up. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, had presented to hostile boardrooms, had stared down corporate sharks without flinching. But this was different. This was his daughter's future, and he wasn't the one in control. Elena sat beside him, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. She'd dressed carefully for court. A simple navy dress, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked exhausted. They all were. "We're going to win this," Marcus said, more to himself than to Elena. "What if we don't?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "What if the judge sides with your mother? What if they decide Lily needs appropriate family structure or whatever other nonsense their lawyers are claiming? Then we appeal, we fight, we do whatever it takes." The courtroom doors opened, and their lawyer, Michelle Garrison, a family law specialist with a reputation for being utterly ruthless when protecting her clients, stepped out. "We're up," she said. "Remember what we talked about. Answer questions directly and honestly. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. And, Marcus, if your mother's lawyer tries to paint you as an absentee father, we've got documentation to counter that." They filed into the courtroom. It was smaller than Marcus had expected, less dramatic. Just a judge's bench, a few rows of seats, and the weight of his entire world hanging in the balance. Catherine Chen sat on the opposite side of the room with her legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they billed $500 an hour just to breathe. His mother looked as composed as ever, every hair in place, her expression carefully neutral. She hadn't even looked at Marcus yet. The judge was a woman in her 50s, Judge Patricia Mercer, with kind eyes and a reputation for putting children's welfare above all else. That was good. That gave them a chance. The hearing began with Catherine's lawyers presenting their case. They painted a picture of a confused family situation, of a child being raised in poverty by an aunt with no legal relationship to her, of a father who'd only recently discovered his daughter and was still figuring out his role. They called Marcus's parenting into question, pointed out that he worked 80-hour weeks, that his penthouse wasn't exactly child-friendly, that he'd had no experience with children before Lily. And then they brought up Sophia. "Miss Martinez," Catherine's lead lawyer said, his tone dripping with false sympathy, "left Mr. Chen without warning, without any explanation. She chose not to inform him of the pregnancy. These are the actions of someone who believed Mr. Chen would not be a suitable father. Why else would she have run?" Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the table. Michelle put a steadying hand on his arm. "Miss Martinez was young and scared," the lawyer continued. "She came from a difficult background: foster care, poverty, minimal education. She made poor decisions based on fear and insecurity. And now her sister, Ms. Rodriguez, is continuing those poor decisions by attempting to isolate this child from her rightful family heritage. Elena was shaking beside Marcus. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing it hard. "Mrs. Chen simply wants what any grandmother would want," the lawyer concluded. "The opportunity to know her granddaughter, to provide Lily with the stability and resources that come with being part of the Chen family legacy, to give her opportunities she would never have otherwise." When it was their turn, Michelle stood with the kind of confidence that came from being completely prepared. "Your Honor, this case isn't about what Mrs. Catherine Chen wants. It's about what's best for Lily Rodriguez. And all the evidence shows that Lily is thriving exactly where she is." Michelle presented their documentation. Report cards showing Lily was excelling in school. Letters from teachers praising her creativity and intelligence. Testimony from Dr. Reeves detailing Lily's emotional well-being and adjustment to learning about her father. "Lily is a happy, healthy child," Michelle said. "She has two parents who love her, Ms. Rodriguez, who has raised her from birth, and Mr. Chen, who has been actively involved in her life from the moment he learned of her existence. She has stability, love, and everything she needs. What she doesn't need is to be forced into a relationship with a grandmother who has made it clear she views Lily as something to be controlled rather than cherished." Then it was Marcus's turn to testify. He'd been nervous about this part, but once he started talking about Lily, the words came easily. He told the judge about their trips to the Science Museum, about Lily's rock collection, about the way she asked a million questions and wasn't satisfied with surface-level answers. He talked about the first time she'd called him Daddy Marcus, about reading bedtime stories over video chat when he couldn't be there in person, about learning to braid her hair, badly, because she'd asked him to. "Lily is the most important person in my life," Marcus said, looking directly at the judge. "Not my company, not my family legacy, not anything else. Just her. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure she's happy and safe. Even if that means standing against my own mother." Catherine's lawyer tried to paint Marcus as inconsistent, tried to suggest that his sudden devotion to Lily was performative, designed to look good for the courts. "Mr. Chen," the lawyer said smoothly, "you have a documented history of working excessive hours, of prioritizing business over personal relationships. How can you possibly claim that a child is now your top priority?" Marcus met the lawyer's gaze steadily. "Because before Lily, I had nothing I cared about more than work. I'd lost the woman I loved. I had no real connections outside the office, and throwing myself into the company was easier than dealing with that emptiness. But Lily changed everything. She gave me a reason to leave the office at 5 o'clock, a reason to care about something beyond profit margins. She made me want to be better, and I am better because of her." "That's very poetic," the lawyer said dismissively. "But words are cheap, Mr. Chen. How do we know you won't tire of playing father and return to your old patterns?" "Because she's not a hobby," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "She's my daughter, and I've already proven I'm committed. I've restructured my entire work schedule around her. I've turned down business opportunities because they would take me away from her. I've changed everything about my life to make room for her in it. So you can question my motives all you want, but the evidence speaks for itself." Then Elena testified. She talked about raising Lily alone, about the struggles and the joys, about how Lily had asked about her father for years, about the stories Elena had told her about the daddy who would love her if only he knew she existed. "I never wanted to keep Lily from Marcus," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "I kept her from him because my sister made me promise. Because Sophia was terrified, not just of Marcus, but of his family, of people like Mrs. Chen, who made it clear that Sophia wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong. Sophia died believing that Lily would be taken from her if the Chen family knew about her. That's the legacy Mrs. Chen created. Fear. And I won't subject Lily to that." Catherine's lawyer tried to discredit Elena, pointed out her financial struggles, her lack of family support, the fact that she'd moved 3 times in 6 years chasing better jobs. "Ms. Rodriguez has done her best," the lawyer said, in a tone that suggested her best wasn't good enough. "But wouldn't Lily be better served by the resources the Chen family can provide? Private schools, trust funds, connections that could open any door?" "Lily doesn't need doors opened for her," Elena shot back. "She's smart enough to open them herself. What she needs is love and stability, and to not feel like she's a pawn in someone's power game." The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, Marcus felt like he'd been through a war. They'd presented every piece of evidence they had, called every witness who could speak to Lily's well-being. Now it was up to the judge. "I'll review all the testimony and documentation," Judge Martinez said. "This isn't a decision to be made lightly. I'll have a ruling within 2 weeks." 2 weeks. 14 days of not knowing if they'd won or if Marcus's mother would be granted access to Lily against everyone's wishes. As they filed out of the courtroom, Catherine finally looked at Marcus. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. Disappointment? Regret? It was gone too quickly to tell. "Marcus," she said, approaching him in the corridor. Her lawyers hung back, giving them space. "Mother, I did this for you," Catherine said quietly. "I know you don't believe that, but I did. You're my son, my only child, and I wanted to be part of whatever family you're building, even if I went about it the wrong way." Marcus stared at her. After everything, the lawsuit, the accusations, the attempt to paint Elena as unfit, his mother was claiming this was about wanting connection? "You have a funny way of showing it," Marcus said. "If you wanted to be part of Lily's life, you could have asked. Could have made an effort to understand our situation instead of trying to control it. But that's not what you do, is it, Mother? You don't ask. You demand. You manipulate. You use money and lawyers to get what you want." "I'm not perfect," Catherine said, and for the first time Marcus could remember, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "I made mistakes with you. I let tradition and expectation override what was actually important. And when I heard you had a daughter, a granddaughter I'd never met, I panicked. I thought I was losing you completely." "You were never going to lose me," Marcus said wearily. "But you might have now, because I meant what I said in court. Lily comes first, always. And if you can't accept that, if you can't treat her and Elena with respect, then we're done." Catherine's mask slipped back into place. "I see. Well, I suppose we'll wait for the judge's decision." She turned and walked away, her lawyers falling into step behind her. Marcus watched her go and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a bone-deep exhaustion. "That looked intense," Elena said, coming up beside him. "She claims she did this because she wanted to be part of our lives. Do you believe her?" Marcus thought about it. "I think she believes it. But I also think she doesn't know how to care about people without trying to control them. And I won't let her do that to Lily." Elena nodded. "So what now?" "Now we wait. And we hope that Judge Mercer sees through all the legal maneuvering to what actually matters. Which is that Lily is loved," Marcus said simply. "By both of us. And that should be enough." The 2 weeks of waiting were torture. Marcus threw himself into work during the day, because it was the only thing that kept him from going insane. But at night, he'd lie awake and run through every moment of the hearing, wondering if they'd said the right things, if they'd made a strong enough case. They'd agreed not to tell Lily about the hearing. No point in worrying her when there was nothing she could do. So life continued as normal. School, homework, weekend visits with Marcus. Family dinners with Elena. Marcus cherished every moment, suddenly terrified that they might be taken away. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Michelle's voice was calm when Marcus answered, which told him nothing. "The judge has made her ruling," Michelle said. She wants all parties present in court tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to deliver it in person. Marcus's stomach dropped. That's not standard, is it? No, Michelle admitted. It usually means the judge has something she wants to say beyond just the ruling itself. Could be good or bad. What's your read on it? Honestly, I think we have a strong case. But your mother has resources and influence. It could go either way. After Marcus hung up, he sat in his office for a long time, staring at the city below. Everything he'd built, the empire, the success, the carefully controlled life, none of it mattered if he lost this. He called Elena. The ruling comes tomorrow. 9 a.m. He heard her sharp intake of breath. Tomorrow. Okay, I can do this. We can do this, Elena. Marcus's voice was steady, even though he felt like he was falling apart inside. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. You are Lily's mother, not because of biology or legal documents, but because you chose her. Every single day for 6.5 years, you chose her. And no judge, no ruling, no amount of money from my mother can change that? Marcus! Elena's voice broke. I mean it. Whatever tomorrow brings, we face it together. As a family. As a family, Elena repeated, and Marcus could hear the tears in her voice. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lily, about the little girl who'd walked into his life and changed everything, about how she'd trusted him despite having every reason not to, about how she'd called him Daddy Marcus with such simple faith that he could be what she needed. He thought about Sophia, about how she'd been so scared of losing Lily that she'd run instead of fight, about how that fear had cost her everything, her life, her chance to raise their daughter, the future they could have had together. Marcus wasn't going to make the same mistake. Whatever the judge decided tomorrow, he would fight. For Lily. For Elena. For the family they'd built from tragedy and second chances. He would fight until there was nothing left to fight with. The courtroom was even more tense than it had been 2 weeks ago. Marcus sat between Elena and Michelle, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Catherine Chen sat with her legal team, her expression unreadable. Judge Mercer entered, and everyone stood. When they sat back down, the judge spent a long moment reviewing the papers in front of her. The silence stretched out, unbearable. Finally, she looked up. I've spent considerable time reviewing this case, Judge Martinez began. The testimony, the evidence, the psychological evaluations. And I want to be clear about something from the outset. This court's only concern is the welfare of Lily Sofia Rodriguez, not family legacy, not who has more resources, not who believes they have the right to dictate family structure, only what serves Lily's best interests. Marcus felt Elena's hand slip into his. He squeezed it, both of them barely breathing. Mrs. Chen, the judge continued, turning to Catherine. You've argued that your granddaughter deserves to know her extended family, that the Chen family can provide opportunities and stability. And on the surface, those arguments have merit. However, what I see in the evidence presented is a pattern of control, of using resources and influence to dictate outcomes rather than building genuine relationships. Catherine's face remained impassive, but Marcus saw her lawyer shift uncomfortably. You've never met Lily, Judge Mercer said, never reached out to Ms. Rodriguez or Mr. Chen to request a meeting. Never attempted to understand the family dynamic before filing legal action. Instead, you went straight to the courts, attempting to force visitation. That does not demonstrate a grandmother's love. It demonstrates a desire for control. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the first breath after drowning. In contrast, the judge turned to Marcus and Elena. What I see here is two people who have put Lily's needs above their own wants. Ms. Rodriguez raised this child alone, with limited resources, and, by all accounts, did an exceptional job. Lily is thriving academically, socially, and emotionally. She has friends, hobbies, and a strong sense of security. And Mr. Chen, the judge continued, while new to fatherhood, has demonstrated a consistent commitment to building a relationship with his daughter. He's restructured his work schedule, sought professional guidance, and, by all accounts, has become an active, engaged parent. The evidence shows that Lily is excited about these visits, that she feels safe with her father, and that the transition has been handled thoughtfully. Judge Mercer paused, looking at each of them in turn. This court finds that Lily is in the best possible situation. She has two parents who love her, who communicate effectively, and who prioritize her well-being above all else. To disrupt that dynamic by forcing a relationship with a grandmother, who has shown more interest in control than connection, would not serve Lily's best interests. Marcus felt Elena's grip tighten on his hand. Therefore, Judge Mercer said firmly, I am denying Mrs. Chen's petition for grandparents' rights. However, she held up a hand as Catherine's lawyer started to speak. I am not closing the door permanently. Mrs. Chen, if you wish to have a relationship with your granddaughter, you may do so. But it will be on Lily's terms, facilitated by her parents, Mr. Chen, and Ms. Rodriguez. You will not have court-mandated visitation. You will have the opportunity to earn a place in Lily's life through genuine connection and respect for the family structure her parents have built. The judge's gaze hardened. And let me be clear, if you file another petition attempting to circumvent the wishes of Lily's parents, this court will view it as harassment. The door is open for you to be a grandmother, Mrs. Chen, but you'll have to walk through it the right way. Marcus felt tears sliding down his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. Beside him, Elena was openly sobbing, her shoulders shaking with relief. They'd won. They'd actually won. Court is adjourned, Judge Mercer said, and brought down her gavel. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a benediction, like the final note in a symphony, like the word home after being lost for years. Outside the courthouse, Elena threw her arms around Marcus, and they stood there on the steps, holding each other while people streamed past. Two people who'd been brought together by tragedy and had somehow built something beautiful from the wreckage. We did it, Elena said, her voice muffled against Marcus's shoulder. Oh my God, Marcus, we did it! You did it, Marcus said, pulling back to look at her. You raised an incredible daughter. You protected her. You loved her even when it was hard. This is your win, Elena. Ours, Elena corrected, smiling through her tears. This is our win. We're a family, remember? A family. Such a simple word for something so profound. Marcus had spent his whole life trying to live up to the Chen family legacy, the expectations, the pressure, the weight of generations. But this family, the one he'd built with Elena and Lily, this was different. This was chosen. This was real. I need to go pick up Lily, Elena said, checking her watch. She gets out of school in 20 minutes. Do you want to come with me? We can tell her together. I'd like that, Marcus said. I'd like that very much. They drove to Lily's school in Elena's car, a 10-year-old Honda that needed new tires and made concerning noises when it turned left. Marcus made a mental note to take care of that, then stopped himself. No. He'd ask Elena if she wanted help with it. This wasn't about him swooping in with money to fix things. It was about being partners. Lily burst out of the school building with her usual enthusiasm, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. When she saw both Marcus and Elena waiting, her face lit up. Daddy Marcus, what are you doing here? It's not your day? I had some free time, Marcus said, catching her as she launched herself at him. Thought I'd surprise you. Can we get ice cream? Lily asked hopefully. Please. Marcus looked at Elena, who was smiling. I think ice cream sounds perfect. They went to Lily's favorite place, a small shop that made everything from scratch and let you sample as many flavors as you wanted. Lily got her usual, chocolate peanut butter, while Marcus and Elena sat at a small table and watched her methodically work through her cone. her legs swinging under the chair. "Should we tell her now?" Elena asked quietly. "Let's wait until she's done," Marcus said. "Let her enjoy her ice cream first." When Lily had finished and cleaned the ice cream off her face with approximately 17 napkins, they walked to a nearby park. It was a beautiful fall afternoon, the kind where the light turns golden and everything feels suspended in time. They sat on a bench while Lily played on the swings. Marcus watched his daughter pump her legs, going higher and higher, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "Lily," Elena called. "Come here for a minute, mija. We need to talk to you about something." Lily came running over, slightly breathless. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby. Nothing like that." Elena pulled Lily onto her lap. "Remember how we told you about Daddy Marcus's mother? About how she wanted to meet you?" Lily nodded seriously. "The grandmother who went to the judge." "That's right. Well, we went to see the judge today, and the judge said that you get to decide if and when you want to meet your grandmother. Nobody can force you to have a relationship you don't want." Lily's brow furrowed. "So I don't have to meet her?" "Not if you don't want to," Marcus said. "But Lily, if you ever do want to meet her, we can arrange it. On your terms. When you're ready." "Is she nice?" Lily asked. "The grandmother." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. How did they answer that honestly without poisoning Lily against Catherine? "She's complicated," Marcus said finally. "She's used to things being a certain way, and she has trouble when things don't go according to her plans. But she's not evil. She's just difficult." Lily thought about this. "Like how Mrs. Peterson is difficult. My teacher from last year, who was always grumpy, but also gave the best stickers?" Marcus couldn't help but smile. "Something like that, yeah. Okay, maybe I'll meet her someday, but not yet." Lily looked up at Marcus with those eyes, his grandmother's eyes. "Is that okay, Daddy Marcus?" "That's more than okay, sweetheart." "That's perfect." Lily smiled and wriggled off Elena's lap, running back to the swings. Marcus and Elena sat together watching her play, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, Marcus felt at peace. "What now?" Elena asked softly. "Now we live," Marcus said. "We raise our daughter. We figure out this co-parenting thing as we go. We make mistakes and fix them and keep showing up. That simple?" "That's simple," Marcus confirmed. "And that complicated," Elena laughed. "You know what's weird? I was so scared when you found out about Lily. Scared you'd try to take her away, or that you'd be an absent father who disappointed her, or that you'd just throw money at the problem and call it parenting. But you've surprised me at every turn." "How so?" "You show up," Elena said simply. "Not just physically, but emotionally. You're learning who Lily is. You're willing to look foolish or vulnerable or uncertain. You're not trying to be perfect. You're just trying to be her dad." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Sophia would have been a better parent than me." "Maybe," Elena said. "But Marcus, you're a pretty damn good parent yourself. You just had to figure out what mattered." What mattered? For so long, Marcus had thought what mattered was success, achievement, building something that would outlast him. But sitting in this park, watching his daughter laugh as she swung higher and higher, he realized he'd been measuring the wrong things. What mattered was this. These moments. This family. Everything else was just noise. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in December, Marcus woke up to someone jumping on his bed. "Daddy Marcus! Daddy Marcus, wake up! It's snowing!" He cracked open one eye to find Lily bouncing excitedly, already dressed in pajamas covered with snowflakes. Through the window of his penthouse, fat white flakes were indeed falling, transforming the city into something magical. "I see that," Marcus said, smiling. "What time is it?" 6:30. "Can we go build a snowman?" "Please, please, please." Marcus glanced at the clock. He'd gotten 4 hours of sleep. In his old life, before Lily, he would have been annoyed by the early wake-up. Now he just felt grateful to be the person she wanted to share this with. "Let me get dressed, and make some coffee. Then we'll see how much snow accumulates. Yay! Lily launched herself at him for a hug, then ran off to the kitchen. Presumably to wait impatiently while watching the snow fall, Marcus got up, pulled on jeans and a sweater. He'd learned that business casual wasn't appropriate for building snowmen, and headed to the kitchen. Elena was already there, making coffee and looking amused. "She woke you up too?" Marcus asked. 15 minutes ago, Elena confirmed. I tried to tell her to wait until at least 7, but she was too excited. They'd started doing this a few months ago, trading off who stayed over at Marcus's penthouse when it was his weekend with Lily. It was easier than constantly shuttling Lily back and forth, and somewhere along the way, it had started to feel less like an arrangement and more like, well, like family. Elena had her own room now, one of the spare bedrooms that Marcus had converted into a comfortable guest space. Nothing fancy. Elena had made it clear she didn't need luxury, just a good bed, some bookshelves, and a chair by the window where she liked to read in the mornings. "Coffee?" Marcus offered, and Elena nodded gratefully. They stood together at the window, watching the snow fall while they sipped their coffee. In the living room, Lily was pressed against the glass, narrating to Mr. Buttons about all the things they'd build in the snow. "She's happy," Elena said softly. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "She is. So are you." Marcus looked at Elena, at this woman who'd become so much more than just his co-parent. She'd become his friend, his partner, in figuring out this whole parenting thing. Someone he trusted implicitly, who called him on his bullshit and celebrated his victories. "Yeah," he said again. "I really am." The doorbell rang, surprising all of them. Marcus checked the time, 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Who would be visiting this early? He opened the door to find his mother standing in the hallway. Catherine Chen looked different than the last time he'd seen her. Smaller somehow, despite being the same physical size. She wore a simple coat, expensive but not ostentatious, and she held a wrapped package in her hands. Her carefully maintained composure seemed shakier than usual. "Marcus," she said, "I'm sorry to come unannounced. I know I should have called, but I was afraid you wouldn't answer." Marcus stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "What do you want, Mother?" "I want—" Catherine's voice wavered slightly. "I want to apologize. And I want to meet my granddaughter, if she'll have me." "If you'll allow it." Marcus heard footsteps behind him. Elena had come to see who was at the door, and Lily was peeking around her legs, curious about the visitor. "Who's that?" Lily asked. Catherine's eyes locked onto Lily, and Marcus saw his mother's carefully constructed mask crack completely. She looked at his daughter with an expression Marcus had never seen on her face before. Wonder, regret, and yes, love. "Hello, Lily," Catherine said softly. "I'm your grandmother, Catherine." Lily studied her for a long moment. "The difficult one?" Despite everything, Marcus had to suppress a smile. Catherine looked momentarily taken aback. Then, impossibly, she laughed. "Yes," Catherine said. "The difficult one. But I'm trying to be less difficult." That's a work in progress." Lily looked up at Marcus. "Can she come in, Daddy Marcus?" Marcus looked at Elena, who gave a small nod. Then he looked back at his mother. At this woman who'd caused so much pain but who was at least attempting to make amends. "1 hour," Marcus said. "You have 1 hour. And Mother, if you say anything that hurts Lily, if you try to manipulate or control this situation in any way, you leave and you don't come back. Understood?" "Understood," Catherine said, and for once she sounded humble. Marcus stepped aside, letting his mother enter. The next hour was awkward and wonderful and strange. Catherine sat stiffly on the couch while Lily showed her the rock collection, explaining in detail about each one. She told Catherine about school, about her favorite books, about her plans to build the world's biggest snowman. Catherine listened, really listened. She asked questions, tentative, uncertain, like she was learning a new language, and slowly, gradually, her rigid posture relaxed. "Your mama," Catherine said at one point. "I never really knew her, but I should have. I should have seen what my son saw in her. Her strength, her determination, her kindness. I was wrong about her, Lily, and I'm sorry for that." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "Mommy Elena says everybody makes mistakes, and that what matters is if you fix them." "Your mommy Elena is very wise," Catherine said, and there wasn't a trace of condescension in her voice. She looked at Elena. "Thank you for raising her so well, for loving her when I wasn't there." Elena's eyes were bright with tears. "She makes it easy to love her." When the hour was up, Catherine stood to leave. She bent down to Lily's level. "Would it be all right if I came to visit again?" "Perhaps we could. I don't know what 6-year-olds like to do, but I'd like to learn." "We could build the snowman together," Lily offered. "If it snows enough." "I'd like that very much," Catherine said. She pulled out the wrapped package she'd brought. "This is for you. It's not a bribe or an attempt to buy your affection. It's just something I thought you might like." Lily unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a book, old, leather-bound, clearly valuable. "The Complete Works of Beatrix Potter," Lily read slowly. "It was mine when I was your age," Catherine said. "And my mother's before that." "I thought, perhaps you'd like to have it." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? This was yours?" "Yes, and now it's yours. If you want it?" Lily hugged the book to her chest, then spontaneously hugged Catherine. Marcus's mother went very still, like she didn't know how to respond. Then, slowly, she wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. "Thank you, Grandmother Catherine," Lily said. After Catherine left, with promises to call before her next visit, to respect boundaries, to try to be the grandmother Lily deserved, the three of them stood in the entryway, processing what had just happened. "Well," Elena said, "that was unexpected." "That was terrifying," Marcus corrected. "What if she'd said something awful? What if she'd hurt Lily?" "But she didn't," Lily said, still clutching her book. "She was nice. Kind of scared, I think, but nice." Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. His 6-year-old daughter had seen something in his mother that he'd missed. Not cruelty, but fear. The fear of being shut out, of losing the last connection to her son, of being alone with her mistakes. Maybe people could change. Maybe it was never too late to try to be better. "So," Lily said, looking at the window where snow was still falling, "can we build that snowman now?" And they did, all three of them, bundled in coats and scarves and mittens, building the biggest snowman the penthouse courtyard had ever seen. They gave it a carrot nose and button eyes, and one of Marcus's expensive scarves that would probably be ruined by the wet snow. But Marcus didn't care. Because Lily was laughing and Elena was smiling, and for the first time in 7 years, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not in a boardroom or a corner office or a penthouse that overlooked a city he'd conquered, but here, in the snow, with his family. Home, the kitchen in Marcus's penthouse, their penthouse now since Elena had officially moved in 6 months ago, was chaos. Lily, now 8 and somehow even more talkative, was explaining the science behind her volcano project to anyone who would listen. Elena was attempting to frost a cake while simultaneously helping Lily with measurements. Marcus was setting the table for dinner, a task that somehow always took longer than it should, because Lily kept interrupting with questions. "Daddy Marcus, did you know that Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD and buried an entire city?" "I did know that, yes." "And that the people were preserved in ash? They found them thousands of years later in the exact positions they died in." "That's very interesting, sweetheart, but maybe less death talk before dinner." The doorbell rang, and Lily ran to answer it. Catherine entered, carrying a dish and looking far more comfortable than she had 2 years ago. She'd become a regular presence in their lives. Not overbearing, not controlling, but genuinely engaged. She attended Lily's school plays and science fairs. She'd taken Lily to the theater. She'd even apologized to Elena properly, with tears and genuine remorse. They'd never be best friends, Catherine and Elena. But they'd found a way to coexist peacefully, united by their love for Lily. "Grandmother Catherine," Lily hugged her. "I'm building a volcano." "How exciting," Catherine said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. "You'll have to show me after dinner." Robert arrived next. Marcus's assistant had become something of an honorary uncle, bringing gifts and bad jokes in equal measure. Then Dr. Reeves, who'd transitioned from therapist to family friend. And finally, to everyone's surprise, Sandra Morrison from HR, who'd apparently bonded with Elena over coffee one day and had been integrated into their found family. This was what their family looked like now: unconventional, complicated, stitched together from unlikely pieces. But it worked. During dinner, Marcus looked around the table at these people who'd become his family. Lily was talking a mile a minute, gesturing wildly with her fork. Elena was laughing at something Robert said. Catherine was helping Lily cut her chicken, a simple domestic gesture that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. And Marcus felt grateful, not for the empire he'd built, or the money he'd made, or the success he'd achieved, but for this. For second chances and chosen family and love that showed up even when it was inconvenient. For a little girl who'd walked into his office wearing his grandmother's pendant and changed his entire world. After dinner, after Lily's volcano erupted with baking soda and vinegar to everyone's delight, after the guests had gone home and Lily was in bed, Marcus and Elena sat on the couch with glasses of wine. "She wants to be a volcanologist now," Elena said, amused. "Last week it was marine biologist. The week before that, astronaut." "She can be whatever she wants," Marcus said. "We'll support her either way." "We," Elena repeated softly. "It's nice, having a we in all this." Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd been thrust into his life by tragedy and circumstance, who'd been brave enough to trust him with the child she'd raised alone, who'd become his partner, his friend, his family, who'd become something more, though neither of them had quite acknowledged it yet. "Elena," Marcus started, then stopped. "I've been thinking, Daddy Marcus," Lily's voice called from her room. "I can't sleep. Can you tell me about Mama Sophia again?" They'd started doing this a few months ago. Lily had wanted to know more about her birth mother, about the woman who'd loved her enough to give her life. So Marcus and Elena had started sharing stories, carefully, lovingly, painting a picture of Sophia that was honest but kind. Marcus went to Lily's room, settled on the edge of her bed. "What do you want to know tonight?" "Tell me about when you and Mama fell in love," Lily said, clutching Mr. Buttons. So Marcus did. He told her about a young woman who'd walked into his office and demanded a chance, about how she'd been smart and determined and had made him want to be better, about how she'd seen him, really seen him, when most people only saw the CEO. "She would have loved you so much," Marcus said, stroking Lily's hair. "She would have been so proud of who you're becoming." "Do you still love her?" Lily asked sleepily. "I'll always love her," Marcus said honestly. "She gave me the best gift I've ever received. You." "But Lily, love is a big thing. It's big enough to love people who are gone and people who are here. Your heart doesn't run out of room. Like how I love Mama Sophia even though I never met her. And Mommy Elena who raised me. And you." "Exactly like that," Lily yawned. "Daddy Marcus? I'm glad you found us, even if it took a long time." "Me too, baby." "Me too." He kissed her forehead and left the room, pulling the door partially closed. In the hallway, he found Elena waiting. her eyes bright with tears. "She's amazing," Elena whispered. "How did we get so lucky?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "But I'm grateful every day." They walked back to the living room together. The city sparkled outside the windows, millions of lights reflecting off the water. But Marcus barely noticed the view anymore. All the beauty he needed was right here. "What were you saying before?" Elena asked. "Before Lily called you?" Marcus took a breath. This wasn't a business negotiation or a corporate strategy. This was his life, his heart, his future, and it was terrifying. But Lily had taught him something important over the past 2 years. That love was worth the risk, that family was worth fighting for, that the best things in life were the ones you chose, not the ones you inherited. "I was going to say that I've been thinking about us," Marcus said, "about how we've built this life together. How you're the first person I want to talk to in the morning and the last person I want to see at night. How you make me laugh and call me on my bullshit and make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you." Elena's eyes were wide. "Marcus, I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know we started this as co-parents and we probably need to be careful for Lily's sake. But Elena, I'm in love with you. I don't know when it happened, maybe gradually, maybe all at once. But I am, and I needed you to know." Elena set down her wineglass with shaking hands. "I thought I was the only one who felt that way. I thought I was crazy for falling in love with my sister's ex-boyfriend while we were raising his daughter together." "Our daughter," Marcus corrected gently. "She's ours, Elena, in every way that matters." "Our daughter," Elena agreed, smiling through tears. "God, Marcus, I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to keep things simple for Lily, but I can't help it. You're kind and patient, and you show up, and you're nothing like I expected you to be. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing." Marcus pulled her close, and Elena came willingly, fitting against him like she'd always belonged there. They'd built this family from broken pieces and second chances. They'd learned to trust each other, to parent together, to be vulnerable. Falling in love had been inevitable. They'd just needed time to realize it. "We should probably talk about this," Elena said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Figure out how to tell Lily what this means for our custody arrangement. Tomorrow," Marcus said. "We'll figure it all out tomorrow. Tonight, can we just be?" "Yeah," Elena said softly. "We can just be." And they stayed like that, holding each other while the city lights flickered outside and their daughter slept peacefully down the hall, dreaming of volcanoes and stars and all the adventures still to come. This wasn't the life Marcus had planned. It was messy and complicated and had come from tragedy and loss. But it was real. It was chosen. It was earned. And it was more than he ever could have hoped for. 7 years ago, Sofia Martinez had left him without explanation, carrying a secret that would change everything. She'd made choices born from fear, choices that had cost her life and nearly cost Marcus his chance at fatherhood. But maybe that was the point. Maybe life wasn't about the paths not taken or the chances missed. Maybe it was about what you built from the ruins, how you honored the past while creating the future. Sofia would never see her daughter grow up. But she'd given Marcus and Elena a gift. Lily, yes, but also each other. She'd brought them together in the most unlikely way. And from that tragedy, they'd built something beautiful. A family, a future, a home. And in the end, that was everything. Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. And don't forget to tell us what city you're watching from. Love isn't always enough on its own. It needs trust, communication, and courage. Fear can make us run from the very things that could save us. But second chances are possible. Families come in all forms, and sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most broken places. What matters isn't how a family begins, but how it chooses to show up for each other every single day. And children don't need perfection. They need presence, honesty, and parents brave enough to keep trying, even when it's hard.